Water, and we are doing our interim topic work starting this afternoon. Feedback here. So I would just first like to, we're going to do the roll and we're going to work on some approval of minutes. And then we'll go into our two topics that we'll have for today. And we'll have a few comments before we begin. So Eve, would you call the roll?
So roll call vote for the Select Water Committee meeting on Thursday, May 7th. Senator Crum.
Present.
Senator Driscoll.
Excused.
Senator Grew.
Here.
Senator Jones.
Here.
Senator Larson.
Here.
Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Chestick.
Here.
Representative Fordstrom.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Excused.
Representative Strock.
Excused.
Vice Chairman Boner.
Here.
Chairwoman Lawley.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. That all, sorry. So committee, we are going to begin with the approval of some minutes. Those were sent to you with the packet that you have. So I would entertain a motion to adopt those minutes. Second? All right. Any discussion of the minutes? All in favor of approval of the minutes? Please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, I'm just trying to get my agenda straight here. So our first topic today is going to be on stormwater infrastructure. We're going to have a presentation from the Wyoming Association of Municipalities that I think will involve several speakers, and they do have a PowerPoint presentation. So one of the things I'm going to ask the committee is that we let their presentation continue on, and we'll ask questions when it's completed. There's a little small notebook or notepad by your seat so that if you think of questions while they're talking, you can jot them down. But I think it'll be more expeditious if we do it that way, and then ask those questions after that full presentation. So that's how we're going to start. And again, encourage the committee to ask good questions on both of these topics. That's why we're here. We've assembled people that can answer questions for us. And so I encourage you to do that. So with that, we'll begin. Ashley and your team, come on up. Good to see you back at Select Water.
You guys hear me? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Harpstreet. I'm the Executive Director for Wyoming Association of Municipalities. I am joined here today by my esteemed colleagues, Jennifer Wade, who is the Finance Director from the City of Laramie, and Mayor Matt Murdoch of Pinedale, also the President of the WAM Board. We are going to run through a presentation about the world of stormwater and how enterprise funds service our infrastructure needs. It is a little bit of a musical chairs because we have several entities that the chairwoman asked if we would present kind of the state of the state, if you will, on our world of water. So bear with us, but we have rehearsed, and we're going to try to be expeditious and streamlined and just giving you some information. So.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Matt Murdoch. I am the mayor of Pinedale and also the president of WAM. And I appreciate the opportunity, as Ashley said, to be able to speak to you today. Jen and I will walk briefly through a few foundational points. If you could bring the slide deck up.
I'm working on it.
Oh, that's you. Okay. Through a couple of foundational points related to municipal stormwater systems and why municipalities across the state are concerned about preserving workable local infrastructure tools. Our hope is today's discussion will help frame the issues clearly so that we can continue working collaboratively toward possible solutions before the committee's next meeting. We have prepared a fairly extensive presentation for which incorporates testimony from Laramie, Evanston, Jackson, Cheyenne, Casper, and others. As the chairwoman said, if you do have immediate questions that are pertinent to that particular point, you're welcome to them, but I'm hoping that through the entire presentation, it will answer most of the questions you might have. So if something is said or misspoken, feel free at least to interrupt me. So I'd like to begin with slide 2, which Ashley will bring up in just a moment. This discussion is larger than one city. Stormwater is a statewide infrastructure issue. Every municipality in Wyoming, regardless of size, is responsible for managing runoff, drainage, flooding concerns, and increasingly complex compliance obligations at both state and federal levels. These are not optional governmental activities. They are basic public safety and infrastructure responsibilities, just like streets, sewer, and water systems. The question before us is not whether these systems need to be funded. They do. The question is how municipalities can fund them responsibly, predictably, and transparently over time. And so that's kind of what our first slide is discussing, and we can go to the second slide. Second, municipalities have historically used what are commonly called rate-supported service systems or enterprise-style funds to manage infrastructure systems that operate somewhat like a business. Water systems are the clearest example, but the same structure is often used for wastewater, sewer, solid waste, and increasingly stormwater. The core concept is straightforward. Users of the system help support the cost of the system, and revenues collected are dedicated to that system rather than general governmental purposes. That is fundamentally different from a general tax. In many respects, service-based rates are also viewed as more equitable because they tie the cost of the system more closely to use, impact, or benefit, rather than spreading those costs broadly across unrelated taxpayers. One important point reflected, especially in slide 4, follows that these systems are not simply collecting fees. Wyoming statutes, accounting guidance, and local budgeting practices recognize that responsible system management includes ongoing operations, employees and material costs, reserves, depreciation planning, and long-term infrastructure replacement. In other words, communities are expected to plan not only for today's needs, but for future systems, failures, and capital obligations as well. Those systems also require long-term planning. Infrastructure does not last forever, as many of us are discovering. Pipes fail, detention systems age, culverts collapse, drainage systems built decades ago often no longer match current development patterns or runoff realities. So responsible management includes not only current operations, but also reserves, depreciation planning, and long-term capital investment. Importantly, municipalities use a variety of lawful funding sources to support those systems. User charges are one component, but communities may also use reserves, grants, SLIB funding, SRF loans, internal transfers, other non-tax-backed mechanisms depending on local circumstances. As we have worked through these issues over the past several weeks, one thing has become increasingly clear to all of us, I think. Part of the present confusion stems from the overlap and ambiguity between Title 15 and 16. There appears to be broad agreement that voter approval should continue to apply where Wyoming has traditionally required it, particularly for new taxes and general obligation debt backed by taxing power. At the same time, municipalities also need workable authority to operate ordinary stormwater systems through lawful service-based rates and other non-tax-backed funding mechanisms. WAM's concern is that under the current wording of Title 16, ordinary municipal stormwater systems may be unintentionally swept into a framework that was never clearly distinguished from ordinary Title 15 authority. That is why WAM is not here today asking for broad new powers, but we are asking for clarity, and I think that's what we're all looking for. So we appreciate the ongoing work of the committee, Senator Crum and his time with us the previous week, LSO, municipal attorneys, and local officials across the state who have been working through these issues carefully and collaboratively. To help ground this discussion in real-world examples, I'm going to let Jen and others will now walk through several Wyoming communities and some of the basics of how the process works.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Lawley, Vice Chairman Boner, and good members of the committee. Like Ashley previously introduced, I am Jennifer Wade, and I currently have the pleasure of serving as the Finance Director in Laramie. I am a CPA, and I'm happy to be supporting the mayor today with just a little bit more information about enterprise funds, rate-supported service systems, and what this all means, and how it's maybe different from how we manage general taxes in Wyoming. And so we thought first it might be a great idea to take a look at what the Department of Audit says about these rate-supported service systems. So specifically, the department calls out water and sewer systems as enterprise funds in Wyoming. And they go a little bit further, and they emphasize that really these funds, these rate-supported service systems, the goal is to determine the total cost of operating that system and to make sure that those funds are segregated and not combined with the funds of other government because they are for the specific purpose of maintaining that system. They also give nod to what you'll see in state statute a fair amount, and that's the term depreciation fund. And if you say that term in front of most people, their eyes kind of glaze over. And so we thought it might be really important to take a look at what that depreciation fund actually means. The Department of Audit tells us that that depreciation fund is for replacements and additions to the system. Really, the way we would interpret that is it's really planning for the long term, right? It's that capital reserve that is necessary to support these infrastructure intensive operations like water and sewer enterprise funds. So let's also take a deeper dive into fees in rate-supported service systems because these fees are very different from general taxes. Specifically, these fee structures are based on either the impact of a user to the system or how much of that system that user consumes. You'll often find different user classes that are based on those varying impacts. And I'd like to give you a specific example of those varying impacts today. And so if we think about a sewer system, the impact of, say, a commercial kitchen of a large restaurant is going to have a very different impact on that system than, say, like a brick and mortar retail establishment, like maybe the Bath and Body Works in Laramie. Right? And so you would build your rate structures in such a way that it is acknowledging that different impact on the system because your goal is to spread out those rates equitably among user classes. That's very different than the way that general taxes fund governments. And so general taxes are not at all about system impact, and they're not at all about consumption. And so it's collecting a general tax from a broad population and putting that tax into a general pool, and then using that pool of resources to provide services. And so user fees, they tend to be for restricted purposes, for the purposes of that system. And again, they're based on that usage or impact, which is very different than a general tax. With the next slide, if you're a little bit more visual, and I think that many people are, you'll see in the blue section of the slide an example of what that broad tax pool, that general taxation really looks like. And we see this most in a government's general fund. You all will be very familiar with that from the general fund of the state of Wyoming. Local governments have their own general funds, of course, and those general funds come from the funds in the general fund come from general taxes like property taxes and general sales and use taxes. And those taxes are pooled and then used to provide for a variety of public services, not just one or two services. So things like fire, EMS, police, parks and recreation, roads, those are all things that come from a general fund. Whereas if you see the section of the graphic that is a little bit more green colored, you're going to see that distinction for these rate-supported service operations. You'll see that there's a line in between them. It's not really as obvious on the presentation that I'm looking at here on the screen, but there's a really strict separation of funds. And so you don't pool resources from these user-supported operations along with your general fund. You actually restrict them in their own fund, and you use them to provide that service. The funds for these user-supported services come from a variety of sources. User fees tend to be a primary source, although they're not the only source. But those resources are restricted for providing those services. And the focus of those rate-supported service systems is really on measuring the full cost of providing that service over time. And as you'll notice in the graphic, really making sure that we provide for that depreciation fund so those needs for long-term capital planning can be addressed. So big difference in Wyoming between general taxes and user fees, and the courts have also found that too in the case law. So we all know in Wyoming, there's been a lot of conversation about reserves recently. And these conversations about reserves apply to any city funds we hold. It's certainly not just the general fund, it's also our enterprise funds. And so, especially because we are exploring this phrase, depreciation fund, we thought it was really important to talk about reserves today and how we manage risk through holding reserves, in particular in our rate-supported service systems. And so these depreciation funds, the way we're going to define that is really the reserves that a government holds for long-term capital investment. And that's actually how we talk about it in Laramie. We don't use the term depreciation fund, even though they're exactly the same thing. And the idea of this fund, these reserves for long-term capital investment, is that you're saving up over time to be able to accomplish major capital investment. There are two examples in our presentation that you can apply in a variety of circumstances if you're explaining this to a member of the public. A great example would be maybe we're saving up $220,000 for a vac truck, and we need to save for that over time. It's maybe $31,000 a year for 7 years, plus a little bit for inflation because we know the value of the dollar does not stay the same every year. And so we're going to have to be thinking about that and planning for it. You can apply that same logic to $1 million water line project, to a $5 million water line project, or maybe a $100 million water treatment plant project. And so starting more simply with those smaller examples, I think is a really helpful tool for thinking about how these capital reserves work, how we save up for them, and how we can explain that to people who may feel a little bit confused about that need. It's kind of like saving for a down payment on a house. And so I know some of our member communities are really engaging with their residents about this topic and kind of trying to explain that in a way that's more relatable. And again, the idea is that you're saving for big things in a local government. What we're actually saving for is the ability to maintain our infrastructure systems in a way that meets the needs of our community and helps our communities grow and change over time. Yes.
So I would just add in there, I know when you see like the amount of money that a town might hold, you can get confused because you'll say, oh, the town of Pinedale has $15 million. You have to understand that some of that money is actually set in reserve. And the other part, as Jen said, is reserves mitigate risk. And I think one of the complaints or things that we often hear as municipalities when we come to the legislature or SLIB is, are you planning for an emergency? Did this just happen, or did you have funds set aside so this could be taken care of? And so that's where reserves really play an important role, is that we have to be having a certain amount of money in a depreciation account so that if tomorrow Pinedale's water system went out, I have $4 million that I can tap into immediately, plus SLIB, MRG, SRF that we can come to and partner. If we were to come to you with hands empty, I think any adult would look at their child saying, didn't you know at some point your car was going to run out of gas? Didn't you know at some point you were going to have to change that tire? Didn't you know? And that's one of the challenges that municipalities have, is that we have to balance user fees to reflect that. And that can be, as you may guess, very political. If we start actually reflecting rate fees in line with depreciation, it can become a very scary number. And so that's a difficult balance that we at the local level have, is like how to turn around to my mother and say, I'm sorry, your water and sewer rates are now $130 a month and not $65 because Pinedale now needs to put a $30 million wastewater treatment plant in. But that's how we do it. And just to put that out there, that I know there's oftentimes confusion, and that's where the depreciation account plays.
Thank you, Mayor, for chiming in and giving a real world example to back that up. We do want to say, let's acknowledge what happens when there's not reserves in hand, right? And so you may find a community at the legislature asking for money, or maybe they just ignore the problem. And then nothing gets done and their infrastructure system starts to deteriorate, which is not great for public safety or any community, or the ratepayers are basically passed on the burden of that lack of being able to plan. And so reserves are a key component of rate supported service systems. And in my opinion, honestly, any governmental fund operation. If we go to the next slide, you'll see some of the good work that folks are doing in Sheridan and in Cody to try to explain this concept of reserves to their communities in a way that really ties it to the household budget. And so what you'll see on your left hand, well, we'll go one more slide. Yeah. What you see on the left-hand side is like a bar that shows an ideal family budget. And then you see an example from a water enterprise fund. And I'm going to draw your attention to the red line in the middle. And the way the folks in Sheridan and Cody are really trying to explain this is that red line is like finding the sweet spot for managing risk through the holding of reserves, and really getting that level of reserves correct for your community and the needs of that infrastructure system is what this is all about. And so if you think about it this way, we all have current period expenses. For a household, those current period expenses, if you're, saving up to buy a home, it might be savings for that. It might be your current operating costs, like your groceries, your gas, things like that. Your car payment, maybe you're saving up for replacement tires because my goodness, those are expensive these days, right? And so that's what you need to just live. That's just living in the current period and the current day. Now, below that red line, that's where financial sustainability comes into play, and that's where long-term planning comes into play. You see emergency savings starting to build. You see that 3 months being set aside just in case the awful situation happens where you lose your job. And that's where you start to see that real sustainability. The same concepts apply to a rate-supported service system like a water enterprise fund. So in the current period, which that is what that current budget is going to represent, you might see like some savings for future debt service if you're going to get an SRF loan and you know it's coming. You'd see current period capital investment. You'll see some budgeted debt service. You'll also see operating costs. But what's going on in that current year budget is not what managing that infrastructure system is actually all about. You've got to have emergency reserves. You've got to have that depreciation fund. And we tend to think of those things in two separate categories. The emergency reserve, commonly recommended, is 3 to 6 months of just operating costs. And that's for if an emergency happens in a smaller scale that you don't expect. And so 3 to 6 months of operating costs is not going to be a dollar amount that's going to let you save up for big capital investment. It's there for these purposes of an emergency and an emergency only. Your depreciation fund, that reserve for capital investment, is really that set of resources that you're using for the long term to invest in that rate supported service system. Do you have something to add? Okay. And so let's talk about a target for reserves because, especially as the value of money has changed a lot since 2022, we all know what that looks like, but many members of the public don't, and they're very uncomfortable. And I understand the reasons for that because $1 5 years ago is not the same as $1 today. And also, with some different things going on in the state, you're seeing some differences in reserves between communities, and I think it's causing some questions. And so, is there a target? Is there an ideal target for these depreciation funds, these emergency reserves? How do we even talk about this thing? Well, I would tell you, my professional opinion is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution for the amount of reserves a local community should have. And I mean that with should have. So no prescribed solution, 99 different municipalities, 99 different solutions is the best way I can say it. That figure is going to very much be based on risk and local need. And so here's a great example. a community who has been investing in their maybe water system for a really long time and who knows and has been planning for what's ahead for the next 10 to 20 years, maybe can have a little bit less reserve because they've really been investing in that system. Their rates are caught up, and they've really been delivering for that community in that way. And so maybe they can get away with a little bit less in reserve unless they have a water treatment plant in their future. However, if it's a community that really is just starting on that journey of managing these systems in a long-term way, boy, the amount of reserves that they need to manage risk is going to be a very different number. And for that community, it could be a really large number. A number that maybe in a community like Casper isn't going to seem as large, but for one of our small rural communities is going to be a staggering number. And so that's why we think it's so important to make sure that these systems are provided for and taken care of over the long term. In Laramie, our planning period for our water and wastewater utilities is a 10-year period. And so we're always managing our rates in a way that is looking forward for that 10 years, really trying to minimize the impact on the rate paper. So slow and steady and affordable is how we like to keep it, so that when we get to these big projects, there's enough reserves on hand that we're not having to come back to the ratepayer and adopt huge rate increases all at once, or be in a worse situation and say, gosh, we've waited so long that there's actually just no way that we can pass this on to the ratepayer because that number is too much for the local community to bear. And so if we're looking at targets, we'd say for emergency reserves, that 3 to 6 month number, you're going to find that cited like at the Government Finance Officers Association. I think that's a number we can hang our hat on just for that emergency fund. That long-term capital fund reserve, that depreciation fund, is the number that's going to vary so much between communities. And local governing bodies really need the ability and authority to set those reserve levels based on the system condition, the risk, and the local community's needs and the will of that local community.
Madam Chairwoman, we just wanted to give you an overview of the state of the stormwater. And LSO, if you would be so kind to let Mark Harris and Tony Tolstead in, and they'll be part of this next part. Yeah, okay, great. So just a couple of bullet points on what's going on. So WHAM wants to make sure you understand we support municipalities across the state addressing the recent stormwater management discussion by rescinding the currently agreed upon fees and committing to the future collaborative talks with local and statewide leaders. Stormwater management is a critical infrastructure need in every town and city across the Cowboy State. Without proper drainage and filtration, stormwater issues lead to floods in streets, homes, and businesses, erosion of roads, including the creation of potholes, pollution in our rivers and streams, and the long-term higher costs for taxpayers due to the need for constant repaving. We know this issue will require multiple stakeholders to address the steps needed to ensure our towns and cities have the infrastructure to support public safety and protect what we care about. We believe that our local leaders are uniquely prepared for these discussions, having dealt with various stormwater and infrastructure needs over many decades of public service. We look forward to these discussions in the months ahead with our local leaders and public and legislature. Providing that essential service and protecting our communities is what local government does best, and we know we will arrive at a solution that empowers municipalities to continue that important work. I have provided a press release we pushed out upon the rescission of Laramie and Cheyenne's program to affirm our commitment. I am very proud to say our local governments have been responsive to their constituents. No active billing and no funds were exchanged, and if they were refunded. The role of local government works. They heard their constituents. We're going to go through just a couple of state of the states, but also that I didn't have bullet pointed on is I forgot Green River already has a system that they have in place and outline projects to keep storm channels clean, rebuilt, weeded, etc. through a stormwater fee. And Rock Springs is currently in a holding pattern as they are working on developing their stormwater rate and structure. They are currently in conversations with the county to potentially approach a joint effort for stormwater mitigation. Additionally, we have communities like Rollins, and I think Rollins was the last one on the list that had reached out saying they were waiting to see how we proceeded before they took any action. And then I'm going to let Jen talk about Laramie, but while I have the mic real quick, Cheyenne is no longer in litigation. It has been dropped. I have provided Cheyenne's overview of their stormwater system investment, ongoing needs, and master plan. That was the additional handout. we provided to you, and that's in the back of the room. And Mayor Collins is here for additional questions. We just didn't want to take up more time on that.
To sum up Laramie, because I believe Laramie is legend in this regard. Just to kind of back up everyone, remember that our fee went into effect last July. It was not even a month after that the outcry started, and the following month that billing fee was paused and it was refunded within, I think, a period of 2 weeks. And so no money ever exchanged hands in that regard. Our city council looked at this issue for the course of all of last fall, decided that the level of service that we really were aiming for in the beginning was not something that our community would support, and decided that a lower level of service would be best. So they went through those conversations, really listened to the public. But as we were watching what was going on legislatively and really thinking about the current state of Title 15 versus Title 16, ultimately what our governing body decided is that it was really the right decision to repeal that ordinance outright, and wait for further clarity between Title 15 and Title 16, because this is really not where we need to be spending the resources for our community at this time. And so Laramie's lawsuit is still pending, and our ordinance is fully repealed.
Madam Chairwoman, we're ready for Mark Harris.
Mr. Harris, we're ready for you when you are.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Mark Harris. I'm the city attorney for the city of Evanston, Wyoming. I want to express my thanks and our community's thanks for the committee putting a pause on the discussion of this topic. And we're grateful for this opportunity to come before you and work on this issue for our community to continue operation of a system that has proven to benefit and protect our citizens. The city's comprehensive stormwater control system or management system was actually adopted in 1982. The management of that system has been in existence for over 40 years. And in fact, we're tilting now to the backside of 45 and closer to 50 years. Shortly after its enactment in 82, I was privileged to be appointed as the city attorney for the city of Evanston. And I can hopefully provide some context over 40 years ago to our experience of successfully operating a stormwater control system. At the time, between 1980 and 84, at the time that our system was adopted, the city also undertook a study to guide stormwater planning, construction, and operation. And I believe that that study was completed in 1983 and provided valuable information for planning, construction, and operating a system. In that period of time, 80 to 84, the city was undergoing very rapid growth due to the development of the overthrust belt in southwest Wyoming. Now, the timing for that gave the city of Evanston an ideal opportunity to address stormwater management in a way that remains relevant today. The study that was done made several recommendations for further language and modification of our stormwater system, recommended some fee structure, and so forth. But it is still applicable to our community today because after our rapid growth, which the study indicated was for a population of 9,000 to 10,000 people, our 2020 population census is about 12,000 people. So we have been fortunate in one respect from stormwater planning that our growth has been probably around the 2,000 to 3,000 population range, possibly. And as my friend, the city engineer, has told me, is that our physical expansion of our city has not been that much different and infilling from what it was back in the 80s. So that affects how you plan for stormwater and affects the ability to operate your system. And that's why, because of our circumstance, we were able to take advantage of that plan and go from that plan forward. So Evanston's plan places a lot of the maintenance of the systems in new developments on new subdivision and development of land. First off, the developer is responsible for the cost of construction of stormwater facilities in new developments. This is your new subdivision plat request. The city will assume maintenance of and responsibility for stormwater systems only after approval of a plan and plat by the city engineer and final acceptance of that subdivision by the city council. In Evanston, we require subdivision agreements that also provide that once construction of infrastructure is complete, that the developer will, for a 1-year warranty period, be responsible for major repairs and adjustments. So those are a cost borne by the developer, not the city. After this warranty period expires and the final acceptance of the subdivision is complete, the city then assumes all responsibility for maintenance of the stormwater system and other systems. In 1984, the city of Evanston amended the management system to provide for the way, a little bit of change in the way we were going to assess stormwater drainage fees. Those revenues stated in the code were to improve existing stormwater facilities and construct additional needed facilities, including such things as interceptor lines, detention facilities, and disposal facilities for serving developed areas. This development fee that I'll get into in a minute was not intended to fund on-site stormwater drainage for individual developments, but to provide for these major interception lines, detention facilities needed to serve the broader pattern of development throughout the whole community. Importantly, when this system was first set up, the stormwater fees were deposited into the City of Evanston Wastewater Fund, which is a city enterprise fund. This was later changed by action of our council to deposit into the Environmental Services Fund, which is also an enterprise fund, which you have heard about. So under the city's structure, fee rates are based upon the following. The city engineer can receive a special building permit application relating to stormwater, and there are land development fees that are assessed on a per acre basis. A monthly fee is assessed to all water connection accounts. So you have basically 3 fees: special building permit, land development fees, and the monthly fee. Entities that are subject to the monthly fee in our community include the state of Wyoming, Uintah County School District Number 1, Uintah County, Wyoming, and we assess ourselves, the city, stormwater fees. All governmental entities pay the same monthly rate as a standard residential account. Special building permit and land development fees are not assessed against acreage of the state, the county, the school district, or the city or county, because these entities provide planning and stormwater systems as part of their construction process, including facilities like the new Wyoming State Hospital. The Wyoming State Hospital expansion or new construction entailed a submission of a stormwater plan to the city engineer at that time so that the city engineer could review the plan. It was all developed by the state. There were no fees assessed for that plan because the state was taking on the burden of that construction. The special building permit fees that the city has apply only to multifamily, commercial, industrial, and public facility construction, which requires that special building permit. It does not apply to single family residential construction. The standard rate for no on-site detention is $2,875 per acre, and there's a reduced rate at $575 an acre for certain measured stormwater discharge. The land development fee that we talked about in the subdivision process has the same standard rate per acre, and it's based on a calculation of a runoff coefficient It has a reduced rate for on-site detention. Those providing for detention of that stormwater on-site of their development can take advantage of that reduced rate of $575 an acre. That Stormwater Enterprise Fund monthly fee I told you about is currently $5.30 per water connection account, and that is paid by everyone that I mentioned earlier. That fee was originally 50 cents and was first imposed in fiscal year 2009 and has been incrementally adjusted since that time to the current $5.30. So as a result of the $5.30 assessment per water connection account, for example, the Wyoming State Hospital pays the same amount as I do for my residential account, $5.30, regardless of that differential. The original stormwater study, I might note, way back in '83, recommended a $2 assessment of a fee. So the city was able to manage its stormwater system without imposition of that monthly fee until 2009, which I think is an attribute to how well our plan was put together and how we've been able to function and handle this growth since then. I would like to thank the committee for the opportunity to provide you with information about the importance of structuring a stormwater management system at the local level to meet the needs of 99 rather unique communities in our state. Thank you.
Also, if you wouldn't mind letting Tony Tolstead in for Cody. Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, great. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak to you today. I appreciate the good work in describing the overall systems that has been provided to date or so far this meeting, and just wanted to give you a very brief overview of the Cody stormwater system. We established our fund in September of 22. We did just recently finish up a stormwater study, including a good deal of public comment, evaluating our system, our rate structure, and we are still currently working through that in terms of rates and the like, but we did do a public comment period for that, did some good PR to make sure that we engaged our community as best we could, and that is still going, but that has only happened recently. However, looking at that stormwater study as it currently exists, we're looking at about a 10-year, $29 million capital need with regard to improvements and modifications and fixes to our system. This year that we're currently working in, which is fiscal year 26, we see about a $921,000 budget. Our current rate structure exists with residential at $570 per month, and then commercial at $570 per month times the equivalent residential units, which is approximately 7,000 square feet. So whatever that area is divided by 7,000 times the 570. One of the great conversations that we've already had today is a discussion about reserves as it applies to the different funds that we talk about in order to maintain emergency reserves, capital reserves, or unassigned working capital and the like. These items obviously apply, and so we wanted to make sure our reserves at present are sitting right around $600,000. But at present, we also, I would point out, per our existing rules and regulations, if an individual entity feels that they are being charged for, say, for commercial inappropriately, that fee is not reflective of their actual impact on the system, we actually do provide for the opportunity for those individuals to appeal that through a internal process here. We're trying to be as responsive to our citizens while providing these important services as best we can. We would be happy to provide any additional information that you have and appreciate the good conversation and your consideration of these discussions to date. Thank you very much. We're happy to provide anything.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Oh, start again. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tyler Sinclair, the town manager of the town of Jackson. Here today to talk to you a little bit about where Jackson's at regarding stormwater. We do not have a stormwater utility in place. We currently pay for our, what I'd call a pretty basic stormwater infrastructure through our general fund. By using the general fund, we've not felt that that is adequate to kind of keep up with the needs around stormwater, and are exploring and looking at setting up a fund similar to how we look at water and sewer as a core basic infrastructure for the town of Jackson. Jackson has similar issues to other communities, flooding. I think what I'll focus on a little bit more today is environmental quality or water quality. Flat Creek, the primary waterway that runs through the town of Jackson, has been deemed impaired by the Federal Environmental Protection Agency and the State Department of Environmental Quality. So with that, we've gone through the process and had a Flat Creek management plan approved, again, both by the EPA and the DEQ, but we're lacking the resources to actually implement that plan. The number one strategy in that plan, again, adopted both at the federal level and the state level, was the adoption of a stormwater utility for the town to assist us and our other partners in addressing overall water quality and the impairment of Flat Creek in our community. So when we think about, water quality and the environment, having that tool or having that resource similar to a stormwater utility is something we're really interested in and have been looking forward to implementing. As far as kind of how we approached it in Jackson, it's the next slide is, we certainly realize that one size does not fit all, that every one of the 99 communities in the state is a little bit different. We've tried to start with a pretty broad steering committee, stakeholder group, taking in all the variety of different opinions on stormwater, fees, level of service. Also realizing that from an environmental quality and stormwater quality, it's not just the town. The town in and of itself can't address water quality in Flat Creek alone. We have many partners that need to be part of that. So as we've gone in and talked about a utility, we've tried to bring a variety of stakeholders on board to discuss what is the appropriate level for fee, what is the appropriate level of treatment, how does this work in Jackson? And I think that's unique to all the communities in Wyoming. Where we're at right now is we've paused our efforts. We're anxiously engaged in this conversation with you at the state level and with our partners across the state to develop a program that not only works for Jackson, but obviously works for all communities. So we're interested. We're happy to have further dialogue with you and cooperate, but we certainly support the ability and state authorization to allow the creation of a stormwater utility for our community to meet those water quality needs. So with that, I thank you. Happy to answer any questions you have on the Jackson experience and provide our input as you see fit.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, my name is Krista Johnston. I am the Public Services Director for the City of Casper, also a professional engineer. To give you a little bit of background on the needs of our stormwater system, in 2013, we went through the process of creating a master plan. And in that, we found that there were 42 priority projects that were needed to address capacity concerns in our system. Capacity concerns and not addressing those can result in flooding and property damage. At the time, those costs were $46 million. And since that time, we've only had funding to be able to address 4 of those. On top of that, we have an extensive amount of corrugated metal pipe in our system. This pipe is prone to corrosion, and we have had numerous sinkholes in heavily trafficked roads as a result of failure of this infrastructure. The cost of repairing that infrastructure exceeds $8 million. So that master plan project from 2013 in today's dollars, plus the corrugated metal pipe needs, we exceed $78 million in needs of this system. Like the other municipalities here, we do not have an enterprise to address these needs. Right now, the dedicated funds to stormwater is at $20,000 a year. Addressing that 78 million in needs over that with that $20,000 a year would take us approximately 3,900 years with that funding level. And it scares me. Those are the things that keep me up at night, are those sinkholes that develop on the roadways where people are traveling. I would also like to bring up that under Wyoming Statute 24-2-111, municipalities with populations over 1,500 are responsible for cleaning and maintaining storm sewers associated with streets designated as state highways, so WYDOT roads. This requirement obligates municipal resources to support state-owned stormwater infrastructure.
Madam Chairwoman, we're bringing you home.
All right, sounds good.
Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, and Vice Chair, I want to first begin by thanking everybody who's presented, people who've come down to Cheyenne to speak, and also thank you to the committee for your patience working through what is frankly a fairly long presentation. But as I said in the beginning, this is a complicated matter, and complicated matters deserve enough information so that we can approach it. I think the testimony has underscored that this is a real statewide infrastructure issue, which brings me now to our last slide. The legislature has already recognized that Wyoming faces major long-term infrastructure pressures through the broader statewide water and wastewater infrastructure study now underway. Stormwater is part of that same infrastructure reality. We still do not have a complete statewide picture of deferred stormwater maintenance, aging systems, future capital obligations, regulatory pressures, or the long-term costs facing municipalities of different sizes and economic capacities. Because of that, we at WAM believe that broad statutory changes should be approached cautiously until there is a further work and clearer statewide understanding. Our goal is instead narrow and practical to help develop a durable framework that protects voter approval where Wyoming law has traditionally required it, preserves workable local infrastructure tools, and clarifies the distinction between ordinary municipal stormwater systems and formally created Title 16 utilities. In other words, we believe the next step should be deliberate clarification, careful drafting, and collaborative problem solving together rather than broad assumptions or one-size-fits-all restrictions. WAM's hope is that today's discussion helps frame the issue clearly so that the committee, LSO, the municipalities, and stakeholders can continue working together towards potential solutions and, if appropriate, develop narrowly tailored draft language before the next legislative session. Madam Chairman, Vice Chair, we stand for any questions that you may have at this point in time.
Thank you, Mayor Burdock. And again, I appreciate all the efforts that you have put into your presentation. I think not only for our committee, but the citizens of Wyoming are watching our activities in the legislature more and more, including our committees, and I really am thankful for that. And it's an opportunity for them to have a broader understanding of the different aspects of this issue and some of the different approaches that cities have made. So I appreciate the effort you put in, and I will now ask our committee if you've got any questions. Also, those online, if you have any questions for any of the presenters. I have a feeling that the good mayor here is kind of up for answering questions. Any questions? Oh, yes, Representative Chested.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for this excellent presentation. Very, very useful, very helpful. We have a lot of work to do. This is a big, complicated issue, and we have a lot of things to think about. And so I'm going to ask a question that maybe nobody can answer, but at least we can identify where we need to do some more research and figure things out. So the current statutory scheme, there's two different provisions that seem to be in conflict with each other, Title 15 and Title 16. The Stormwater Utility Act, which is in Title 16, from my research, was enacted in 1995. It has not been litigated. There's been no case law, so we're kind of a question of first impression here. But do we have any idea? And again, there may not be an answer to this, but do we have any idea what problem that statute was intended to fix? Before 1995, you always had the regular Title 15 powers. Why weren't they sufficient, and what was the 1995 statute intended to fix, if anybody knows?
Madam Chairman, through you to Representative Chestic. I'll give what I have done from my own research, which has been going through a lot of interim discussion and transcripts and everything. As you'll see in Title 15, there is no stormwater. I think at some point in time, the state recognized stormwater, surface water is a problem, both federally, statewide. And so Title 16 was created with that intention of how do we get those financed, created the stormwater utility with the intention that if there were going to be a utility put into place, this is what created it. The conflict, I think, as we talked about, comes into where does 16 apply and where does 15 apply, which is what we need to narrow that language down. And I think there's been some very good discussions around that topic. But I think if we're honest, and I can even look at the water commissioners as well, as I think there has been a negligence of surface and drainage water for decades that has really only become much more of an awareness probably in the last 30 years. And as you heard from the representative from Jackson, there are environmental concerns, there are federal concerns as well. So I think looking at possible flood damage that happened in certain cities, like if we don't do something, there's going to be real damage here. And then you have the creation of Title 16 to say we need to give the towns a tool to create those utilities. Again, we would contend that there is a difference between a rate user system and a utility to some degree, which is where we are having those discussions. And I think we actually have some really good ideas in the discussions that we've had. But I would argue that's probably, there was an awareness that came in the 80s and said, we've got to solve this. Let's create a tool for municipalities.
Follow
If
up,
there's anybody else that's more clever than I, they can answer as well.
follow up. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Okay. All right, then. We are off the hook for now. We will go to public comment on this topic. And I think we have someone online, but we'll do the in person here. And I saw at least one person online, Eve, but okay. Let them know. Hi, welcome to Select Water. Introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like us to know.
My name is Beth Blackwell. I'm the grants and loan specialist for the city of Newcastle. I have quite a bit of knowledge related to water from my prior experience at OSLI, helping manage the state revolving fund programs and the mineral royalty grant program. So that's where my testimony and my experience comes from. Storm water management is an important component that is generally not discussed when talking about drinking water and water quality and when water quality and water quantity are discussed. Similar to wastewater, stormwater lacks available funding sources. Similar to, as I said, wastewater, really the only source for communities to go to for funding for this would be the Mineral Royalty Grant Program or the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Program. With there not being a dedicated source for payment related to the Clean Water SRF program, they would have to pledge taxes, something else to pay that loan back. Generally, with an SRF loan, you pledge your user fees. It's not counted against your debt, your overall debt limit, because you're pledging your user fees and you're not using your general fund to pledge it. So if they are going to use their general fund to fund a stormwater, that would go against their borrowing limit. Therefore, they could be limited on where they could borrow for other projects. There is not a commission similar to this for clean water projects, which I think would be important, or you include an element into this program because, as I said, your wastewater and your stormwater impact your drinking water more than people realize. So EPA expects communities to plan for a 100-year flood event. This is also almost impossible for communities with a limited or decreasing population. Storms are strengthening every year in strength. And it kind of goes, my opinion on this is an ounce of prevention is going to be better than a pound of cure, in the sense of we are investing hundreds of millions of dollars into our wastewater and our drinking water systems. If we're ignoring this, we're going to go back and redo those systems that we've dropped all this money into. So planning to take care of this is important. The other thing that is a struggle related to this, and if anyone's heard me testify recently, you've heard this comment: population is an issue that we can't fix in this state. And that is a problem that makes these projects affordable, any water related project affordable. We have 7 systems that are over 10,000. EPA considers a small system 10,000 and less. Most states have a problem funding or systems under 10,000 because they can't afford to use the SRF programs. All of our systems that use the SRF program in the state are under 10,000. So I applaud them in finding out how to do that. The other thing is the average number of users per water system is 220. Think about that. That's difficult to even pay for your operations, let alone save and create reserves. And so when systems have those reserves, they should be applauded for that. When I worked at OSLI and reviewed loans, I wanted a system to have a debt coverage ratio of not less than 1.2, meaning they are paying all their other debts, including the debt that they're requesting, and they have funds left over to save and to pay for emergencies. If we're not helping them do smart funding, we're hurting our systems in the long run. The cost of projects are ever increasing. From 2000 to 2006, the cost for 1 foot of water line has increased 225%, $200 to $650 per foot, making, once again, this difficult. This problem will require support from the state. It will also require out-of-the-box and green options to really address this problem. One of the things that we're known for doing is just continuing to do the one thing. There's a lot of opportunities here for using the stormwater to recharge our aquifers, putting water back into the Colorado River. There's opportunities here that we can find to help our current water situation that we find ourselves in. This situation should be discussed regionally. What a community is doing upstream is going to affect a community downstream. So if we're not communicating, we may be working against each other. And then lastly, I think it's really important that we start educating the public about the costs related to our infrastructure. When I started at OSLI, I was ignorant about the cost to maintain a water system and a sewer system. And people balk at a 8% increase every year. They have to look at what inflation is doing. Running an enterprise account is running a business. If you're not running at a profit, you're doing it wrong, and you're not doing your citizens any service. So if you can save in those times where you're having, your costs are low, don't lower your rates. Keep them there and save that money. That prevents you from having to do large rate increases later on down the road. So I think one thing that will help is some education of our general public of just exactly how much it costs to take care of the infrastructure. They're more likely to complain about a pothole than holy water and sewer lines because they don't see them.
Thank you. Any questions, committee, for this witness? Thank you for being here. Anyone else in the room that wants to testify with regard to the stormwater infrastructure? Come on up. Introduce yourself for the record and tell us what we need to know.
My name is Dale Stevenson. I'm president and CEO of the- Hit the button. The face. One with the face. There you go.
That one.
Yeah.
The other face. Madam Chair Committee, my name is Dale Steenberg and I am President CEO of the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce. We represent just a little over 1,000 businesses in Laramie County and the surrounding region. So there are just a couple of things I think that we need to think about as we move along with this. So I don't think anybody would say that we don't have needs. We know there's needs all over our communities, from roads to water to sewer to buildings to many other things. However, I think we need to think about what impact this has on business, what impact has on our goals, such as home building, and how we're going to move forward with that. The first thing I'd like to discuss with you is what is a tax and what is a fee. And so I think this is a rather complicated one, right? If we take our kids to the zoo, we know this is probably a fee, right? The check you wrote in April, that's a tax. But there's a lot between that gets very confusing. I would say part of the confusion on this is that one way I know that this could be considered a tax is that I've been asked to vote on it a couple of times in the last decade, where my ballot in my county said, you're going to vote on this tax to repair stormwater drainage, right? So my government told me that it was a tax and not a fee. And I hope we can all agree that if it is a tax, that we should vote on that from the people. It is a long held Wyoming standard that we do that. So I really think a lot of these things, whether you want to call them a fee or a tax, we have the responsibility of government to make a case to the people that live in our communities to say, is this an expenditure from your pocket that you think is worthwhile? And I think that's an important tenet here. The second thing I'd like to talk about is, you know, I was once told by a legislator in the Wyoming legislature, a fair is a place you take a pig to win a blue ribbon. Perhaps it's the angst from my Southern Baptist upbringing, but I think that in government, we should try to, I want my government to treat me fairly. And I think one of the things we missed today is that we've assumed this is just can absolutely be done fairly across the board and it's simple and we just roll it out, put it in place and that's it. I will tell you, in Cheyenne, I have businesses that when they built were required to spend millions on stormwater drainage to make sure that they weren't impacting the system. But when the tax was proposed and rolled out, they were charged a tax the same way everybody else was. So they got no credit at all for the money that they had put into the system to make sure that they would not have a large impact on that system. I think additionally, when we do that, the way we had looked at it here in Cheyenne was that we were going to do it by impermeable surface. So I can tell you many of my businesses that have opened up that were going to build a building, built the building, and then the government told them, you have to put in more parking spaces. So then we turn around from that and say, well, we required you to put in more parking spaces. Now that's going to mean extra tax for you. So I think we need some framework for this that somehow puts this out in a fair way that gives you credit for work that you do to impact the system, that you do to impact the system less, and that you have to give credit for that and credit for the money that's been expended on that. And then take some responsibility from governing bodies that say, hey, we're going to require you to do things that impact your taxes, even though you don't think you need it. I think just in conclusion, there isn't anybody that's going to say all these needs aren't vital. But if we want business to succeed across Wyoming, we're going to have to figure out ways to do that to make costs equitable, for us to look better than our neighbors. And we're going to have to figure out how to do business in more cost-effective ways if we're going to do that. We're not a cheap place to do business. We don't have small businesses beating down our doors because we're too expensive all across the state. And so now we're sitting here talking about, well, here's how we can raise your taxes. So if we want to be a retirement village, I think we're going to head down that road. But if we want our kids and grandkids to have a place to live and do business, we're going to have to figure this out in equitable, cost-effective ways. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your comments and for being here. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you. Eve, online? Okay. All right, let him in. Mr. Sweeney, good to see you. Can you hear
Thank
us?
you, Madam Chairwoman. Can you hear me?
I can. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not with you today. The time mix-ups in my head got totally out of control. So, my name's Pat Sweeney. I served House District 58, elected in 16, got voted out in 22. And currently serve on the Casper City Council representing Ward 1. So, which is basically downtown. So I wanted to make you aware that during my first session in 2017, I was assigned to corporations and also labor health. But being on corporations, there's a lot to learn, as I think, especially for me as a first timer. After the session, the 2017 session was over, the city of Casper contacted me and said, hey, we'd like to sit down with you and talk about the stormwater. And I'm like, okay, what are we after? And since then, we in 2018 started to work through the process of trying to figure out a way we started in Title 16, trying to carve out a way and figure out a way to make the systems work that you're talking about now, so that there could be an enterprise fund. And we were trying to word it as user fee, which LSO changed to mean, or user fee versus service charge, which was put into it's the better language, as I was told it, as we move forward. So there were a number of versions. I don't think anything, we finally got something ready and put through for the 19 session, which I think one of them was 108, if I remember correctly, at the time. But going through, it took two years, 2 sessions, before we finally arrived on a final version that actually shifted, and I don't have any notes on how it shifted in the final round in the last Senate file, but it all along was contemplated, how do we make it clear to be able to set up an enterprise account, just like we weren't trying to hide or shirk a tax, but very similar to what we do with sewer, water, trash. Those are all enterprise accounts, and how to make it sustainable. Here in Casper, we've taken some of our 5th cent funding and set aside, but it's minimal. I think my recollection is closer to 500,000 that we've shifted over time, which, as our public service director testified to, is a drop in the bucket. So there is a need. The reason Casper was bringing it forward was we had seen, which Evanston should be held up as a terrific model. But we didn't believe at the time, and thankfully the legislature has let them continue. We didn't believe at the time that it was legal. And Senator Schuler, who had been on Evanston's council, testified a number of times that they thought they were doing the correct thing. I still believe they did the correct thing and are doing the correct thing. I think where things have gotten out of whack is in the implementation. I think Evanston's doing a great job. Cody's doing a great job. I haven't really looked at Green Rivers. And I had, after the amendment was passed in the 20 session, I kept asking our city, why haven't we moved forward? And then our city manager left. I was still asking, and then all of this came forward basically through the city of Laramie case. There still is a need. I applaud William's efforts in putting this whole presentation together today. And I thought it was terrific for all of the communities to come forward. But I do want to tell you, there's no funny business here. That's what the intent was the enterprise funds, just like, again, sewer, water, trash, all of our municipalities. And so if we can have some clear language, it certainly would be very helpful. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and again, my apologies for not being there.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney, for jumping on and giving us your thoughts. So thank you very much. Committee, we're going to close public comment. I think we've covered everybody online and in the room for stormwater. So we're going to close that, and we're going to go to committee directives on this topic. And what I am going to do is form a work group. There's been a lot of progress made by the stakeholders, the municipalities, working with Senator Crum, who had a bill on this issue last year, and they've made a good bit of progress, a little bit more to be made, but I think it's wise to follow with what they're doing, some of which you heard about today. So I'm going to create a work group, and it will include, on the legislative side, Senator Crum. It will include Senator Guru and Representative Kensestic. I think that will be a great team to tackle this issue and look at the statutory scheme we have. And what I'm contemplating for those that are on that work group and the stakeholders they'll be working with is that we have a bill draft at our next meeting in August, where we make the first attempt to try to clarify sort of the space in the statute and other concerns that the committee might have consensus on that needs legislative work. So that's how we'll proceed on that. And again, Ashley in particular, because you represent a number of stakeholders, if you will let me know any thoughts you have about others that might need to be at the table. We can talk later, but we'll do that. But that work will work, and they'll come back. And I think I really anticipate we will have a good, clean draft to begin working on as we work towards the legislative session, whether or not we would do that bill. But we'll have put the right work into it because we ran into a lot of complexities in those two statutes and how they interwork. And I think we want to do it right. So that's Mr. Co-Chair. Oh, Senator Crum, I forgot to mention. Hey,
That's okay, Madam Chairman. Thank you. And I'd be a pleasure to work with on that working group. I just want to say thanks to WHAM and to the city of Laramie and to the city of Cheyenne for your hard work over the last several months, and look forward to continuing to work with everybody on this. topic. I'd also think, Madam Chairman, maybe we could get somebody from some of the really the two large public entities that have been kind of affected by this thing. Maybe somebody represented the state of Wyoming for their facilities, especially in the Cheyenne area, and then maybe somebody from the University of Wyoming, at least somehow tied to this, because they seem to be two of the big entities that are playing a role in this factor too. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comments. Any other comments, committee, Vice Chair Bolner?
Yeah, thank you. Just want to extend my thank you also to WAM for taking a step back in the more controversial changes in Cheyenne and Laramie. I'm not sure if we covered that explicitly, but they have officially rescinded the changes that they made. I really do appreciate that. And so thank you for that. As far as other members of the working group, sounds like the Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce may also be a good addition to provide that private sector perspective as well. And so something for Senator Crum and Representative Chestic to consider as presumably take the lead on this, and
Senator
Grew. And Senator Grew and all the members of the working group to make sure we identify everybody who's involved and affected.
Correct. Thank you so much for those comments as well. And I agree. That's I think wasn't maybe as meaningful when it was presented about what Cheyenne and Laramie did, where they listened to their constituents, they pulled back. That was one thing during the session. I know that was important to me, that to have the space to work through this problem, we needed to sort of put a lot of things in abeyance. So we, kind of just everybody stand still, and then let's begin to work the issue, because significant statutory issues. In committee, you have a memo on the statutes and some of the potential lack of clarification needed that's there, and some things, but not really just changes, but it just gives you an overview. And we'll be looking at that before the August meeting. And certainly the work group may use that when they do their work. So thanks so much. I think that concludes the topic for today on stormwater infrastructure. And I appreciate everyone that came, and again, the presenters, and they're giving the information that was really valuable for the public and for our committee. Thank you so much. And with that, we are going to move on to the next topic, and that is our topic concerning consumptive use of water. We're going to talk about that more broadly, that topic more broadly, and then we're going to talk more specifically about data centers. So again, there's some seats. I see people standing, so I want to make sure where there is seats, let's come on in and find them. We'll take a few minutes for you to do that so you're comfortable. There's some up here. I know a lot of people don't want to sit on the front row, but there's about 3 there. Huh? Yeah. So come on in. So committee and members of the public, I want to just take a few minutes to talk about how we're going to walk through this topic this afternoon. And we'll kind of ask the state engineer's office to go ahead and come up and get ready up here. But putting together some information that for the committee and the public, which I think is a really important part of what we do here in the legislatures. We like to try to understand a problem before we begin to figure out what might be the best solutions. And so trying to get some information, you're going to start broadly with the state engineer talking a little bit about consumptive use of water, what it means, why it matters, some of the things that they monitor in this space and already. And then we're going to then be moving through to Dr. Brandt from the Wyoming School of Energy Resources to talk about produced water in particular and why that matters and why it might matter to this discussion. And then we're going to hear from folks that currently have some data centers here to answer to give us some information, answer the committee's questions. And then again, someone who's bringing a facility in it, not here in Cheyenne area particularly, but and the way we'll walk through it is each speaker will have their presentation, whatever they want to share with the committee. The committee will ask questions, and then we will move on to the next the next speaker, same thing. And the public comment will be then at the end as the topic ends. And so again, please take notes if you have things or comments along the way. but keep in mind that our topic, I know that the issue of data centers, that people have different types of concerns concerning use data centers, and I do understand that, and there are other committees this interim that will be handling other aspects of data centers. So we are focused here today on the data centers' use of water. And so that's really important, because that's what the committee has got, is that's what the topic is, that's what the considerations are that we have in terms of whether there's something that we need to do as a statewide policy. So just to give you kind of an overview of how we're going to proceed. And again, we will begin with the State Engineer's Office. Brandon, welcome back to Select Water. It's always good to see you. And I really appreciate you coming and kind of laying out kind of a background and information on consumptive use of water for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brandon Gebhardt, Wyoming State Engineer. I'll first start off with at least our perspective on what kind of the consumptive use and the components of the consumptive use that we look at. But in general, it is water that is diverted for use that does not return to the system. I'll first talk about agricultural irrigation type of uses. That's approximately 80% of the water use in Wyoming right now. And it's got several different components. The first component, when you're thinking about consumptive use of a crop, is the transpiration of the water. That is the water that reaches the roots of the plant, make the plant grow. There's also the evaporation that goes along with the watering of the plant. There's also unintentional use. This could be ditch conveyance loss, could be off-field consumptive use of other plants that aren't intentionally irrigated. A lot of what we talk about is intentionally irrigated, because when we administer and we have these different requirements under the interstate compacts and decrees, we focus largely on the intentional irrigation component of this. So another thing that we look at in light of that is effective precipitation. And that is rain, snow, the precipitation that falls. Some of that goes to supply consumptive use of the plant, either transpiration or evaporation. The rest of it is what we consider runoff. So when we think about the intentional irrigation, the consumptive use associated with that, we factor out that effective precipitation in a lot of what we do. I do want to give a data point in some of our analysis when we talk about changing water rights or transferring these water rights, we look at the consumptive use of the irrigated ag. And the factor of that ranges from about 1.3 to about 2.5 acre feet per acre of an irrigated crop. So the consumptive use of the irrigated portion of that ranges from 1.3 to 2.5, and it depends on the location you are in the state, depends on the soils, depends on the crop type, and it depends on the growing season. So there are many variables, and that's why that range is there. If you factor back in the effective precipitation, we see that consumptive use around like a 3 acre foot per acre of for like alfalfa in this part of our state. So just to give you an idea of how much consumption is used in growing these plants. The other types of consumptive use, like municipal, largely our calculation for municipal use is diversion minus the return flows. What the municipality diverts from the system, and then you subtract off whatever leaves through a treated wastewater treatment plant and back into the system. We've also got consumptive use associated with industrial or municipal uses. Some examples of that include water that's incorporated into a product like concrete, mixing concrete, that water's gone from the system. Some of the miscellaneous uses, processing for like aggregate washing, or product washing, those types of things. We also have construction activities for grading, water used for grading or compaction, or even dust abatement. And we also have the consumptive use associated with solution mining and the evaporation ponds, evaporative cooling, such as thermal power plants, potentially hydrogen production using water to create hydrogen would be definitely a consumptive use. We also deal with reservoir evaporation and trying to figure out the consumptive use associated with that water that evaporates off the flat surface. And then from our perspective, we also look at transfers or transbasin diversions or the export of water out of our state. In our world, that is a consumptive use, especially out of the system that it's diverted. It's completely consumptive once it leaves that system. I'll switch gears a little bit now to kind of the permitting and how we view permitting, particularly for data center and large industrial uses. But any beneficial use of water in Wyoming requires a permit from the SCO. I think it's important that the committee understand the fundamental principles set out in the Constitution under Article 8, Section 3. No appropriation shall be denied except when such denial is demanded by the public's interests. That's a starting point. Applications to appropriate water for beneficial use are granted unless denial is demanded by the public interests. With that as the starting point, the state engineer is then guided by the various statutes in Title 41 when considering various applications. The legislature has provided differing requirements, primarily depending on the source of water applied for: surface water diversion, storage, and groundwater. The differing requirements generally don't focus on the type of beneficial use, but sometimes they do. There are special requirements for irrigation rights, such as identifying the acres to be irrigated and the duty of water, and special rules about in-stream flow. Otherwise, the amount of use is dictated by the amount of water necessary to achieve the purpose applied for without waste. So when considering permit applications for water use for data centers or large industrial projects, they would not be treated any differently than, than any other application for a similar beneficial use. Industrial use is a recognized beneficial use, just as irrigation, stock watering, and municipal uses are. Whether the application is to appropriate surface water, groundwater, or stored water. If the water is supplied from municipality, the municipality rights have broad definition, which allows a municipality to supply industrial uses, including data centers, within their municipal service boundaries. These uses can be satisfied under the municipality's water rights and typically do not require application to my office. Another type of another potential source that I want to address is the potential to use byproduct water as a supply for large industrial or data centers. Under statute 41.3.903, byproduct water is defined as water which has not been put to prior beneficial use and which is a byproduct of some non-water related economic activity and has been developed only as a result of such activity. Byproduct water includes, but is not limited to, water resulting from the operation of oil well separator systems or mining activities such as dewatering of mines. Because this is not put to a beneficial use other than it's a byproduct of the process that is done, we don't require a permit through our office on that. However, if that water is to be put to beneficial use, you could apply and you'd have to apply to my office for a groundwater permit. So if somebody wants to put that benefit, to use that beneficially, it could be permitted as a groundwater supply, provided that it is intercepted, the water is intercepted before it has co-mingled with water of any live stream, lake, reservoir, or other surface water course or part of any groundwater aquifer. And also, the developer of the water is the applicant, or an agreement with the developer has been filed with the SEO. So I was asked the question, can byproduct water be used? And that is generally under 41.3904. Madam Chair, I'd also was asked about, do we report large industrial users? Under our groundwater permitting, we set conditions that require metering and reporting on all permits that seek an appropriation of greater than 50 gallons a minute or 20 acre feet per year, or the use is industrial, irrigation, or municipal. And these typically require monthly and annual reporting of their use. Typically, the direct flow of surface water permits, including those for industrial use, are generally only limited to an instantaneous flow rate, which is enforced during priority regulation. These permits do not generally require metering and reporting unless necessary for some other purpose, such as compliance with the Platte River Recovery and Implementation Program or some other interstate compact or decree. So some examples of where we do collect the surface water information is in the North Platte Basin to satisfy the Platte River Recovery and Implementation Program. In that basin, municipalities and industries have to report their water use every year so we can monitor our compliance with that program. In that basin, we receive reports from 28 municipalities and 6 industrial water users. In the Green River Basin, we do get some municipal and industrial water use reports, but it's certainly not all of them. Madam Chair, I'd also point out that the SEO has a role in industrial siting. If an applicant for an industrial siting permit plans to construct a facility that uses more than 800 acre feet of water per year, the applicant must submit a water supply and water yield analysis to my office. I then will review the analysis and I render a preliminary opinion as to the quantity of water available for the proposed facility. And this is all under Wyoming Statute 35-12-108, paragraph C. The preliminary opinion is then made available for public comment, and then the state engineer will consider those comments and prepare a final opinion for the council. Madam Chair, I'll close out with some of the current data center permits and applications that we have in our office right now. We currently have 2 applications for what we're calling hyperscalers. One is from Prometheus Hyperscale for a facility in Evanston. Those applications are for test wells. I'll point out that test wells are granted for exploratory drilling and hydrogeologic testing. When the test wells are completed, the state engineer's office requires that the well bore be abandoned or a new permit secured upon completion. Due to the nature of these 2 test wells that we're talking about, they provided an appropriation of 0 gallons per minute and 0 acre feet. So this is just exploratory test wells currently. We also have 3 test well permits from Tallgrass. 1 permit was determined to be unsuitable. 2 of the test well permits have been or are in the process of being converted to time limited miscellaneous use permits for construction activities, and 1 existing well is enlarged to supply supplement for the same. These permits are time limited with an expiration of December 31st, 2030. The initial permitted well requested 600 gallons a minute and 967 acre feet, which is approximately the equivalent of about a 300 acres of alfalfa crop. Madam Chair, that is my report. I wanted to be somewhat brief. I know there's a lot of discussion to go on, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much. I think you provided a helpful kind of background on the topic itself, but particularly with data centers as well. And I really do appreciate it. Committee, let's go to questions that you may have for Brandon. You go ahead. With Vice Chairman Volner.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think I would stand to gain a better understanding of how you monitor the amount of water that may be, especially groundwater, in a particular aquifer that folks may be drawing from. How do you know if you're reaching a limit or if it's becoming a little bit too much strain on the system? I know we have control areas currently in Laramie County, Platte County, Goshen County, but just a little bit of the process of how you assess it. If you're going to establish a new one, how do you even know to begin that process? What's that monitoring look like as in terms of the amount of water still left in an aquifer?
Madam Chair, Senator Boner, I think largely the primary thing we look at is through monitoring wells, water levels within the aquifer. Once we start seeing those decline, I think we can then start developing studies and further analyze it. But I think generally it starts with just monitoring of the groundwater levels.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And are there any areas of the state where we're seeing a drop in water levels currently? Outside the current control areas.
Madam Chair, Senator Boner, I may have to phone a friend on that. I have Ryan Cox from my office here. He might be able to shed a little light on what we're seeing around the state.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, Vice Chairman Boner. The monitoring wells we have within the state are mostly or all on the eastern up through Crook County down through Laramie and Albany. We don't have much information on a majority of the state, but the water levels we are seeing throughout the eastern portion of the state tend to have a overall decline over the past however long we've been looking at them, and especially over the last 5 years.
Madam Chair, if I could add on a little bit, I think another indicator of strain on aquifer is if we start seeing a request for interference investigations or complaints from water well owners, if they start seeing significant drawdown. So it may not just be monitoring, but it also is. That could be an indicator of declining aquifers.
Any follow-up? Okay. Any other committee questions? Senator Crum.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. How do you count, I'm going to call it like brackish water that say comes out of a oil well or a gas well that evaporates? How's that water counted in the system, or is it counted at all if it's used or discharged?
My apologies. Madam Chair, if it's a byproduct, we really aren't involved in that. It's when it's put into a beneficial use, and then it is considered a groundwater use. But typically those are much deeper than the wells that people are withdrawing for municipal or not for any other of our purposes. They're much deeper typically. And I don't know that I answered your question or not, but
Madam Chair, thank you. I think so. I think what you're saying is they're really not counted. So if that water got used in a system, because it's coming from a deeper level of a well, it's really an add to the system versus a takeaway from the system.
Madam Chair, Senator Crum, that is true if it is brought to the surface and then allowed to flow into a natural course, then it becomes appropriable water as part of that source. So yes, it could be considered an addition to, say, surface water, or if it percolates back down into a different aquifer, it could be appropriable again at that point.
Any follow-up? I take it no. Any other questions from the committee? I have just a couple. I want to make sure when we're talking about consumptive use and kind of giving us some broad numbers, I think you said about 80% of the consumptive use right now in Wyoming is in the agriculture area, right? Ag area. And then the other 20% is in the entire sort of industrial space. What else in the 20%?
So some of the other categories, Madam Chairman, would include industrial. They would include municipalities. They would include rural domestic. I know I'm missing some. One of our, particularly in the Green River Basin, our second largest water use is reservoir evaporation. So that's another component. But any water use is factored into that other 20%.
Thank you. All right. If no other questions, I guess you're off the hook, and we will let you say goodbye to Select Water, at least for now. And good to see you. And well, Dr. Brandt, if you're in here, I don't know if he's here, Dr. Brandt. Oh, right there. Sorry. We've never met in person. Thank you. Would you please come on up and Dr. Brandt, I'd like you to just start by introducing yourself, telling a little bit about your own background, and then talk a little bit to us about produced water, what it is, what's happening in that space right now, and why that might relate to our topics today. So, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Yes, Jonathan Brandt. I'm a professor in the Civil and Architectural Engineering Department at the University of Wyoming. I also serve as director of the Center of Excellence in Produced Water Management, which is housed within the School of Energy Resources. My background is in water and wastewater treatment, as it involves both municipal treatment, what we drink and use on a personal level, but also industrial water treatment, specifically produced water that originates from oil and gas operations. Next slide, please. So as part of, if you're not familiar with our research center, our charge is to make the most use out of oil and gas produced waters as possible. So our research and work centers on technology development for treating the water to an appropriate standard, and that standard is determined by whatever we're going to use it for. And then as of the past 5 years, it's also resource recovery from those produced waters, specifically things like critical minerals, rare earths, and precious metals like lithium here in the state of Wyoming. So we cover all aspects related from technology development, economic analysis, making sure that it makes monetary sense, but also developing reuse pathways for those resources, including the water. Next slide, please. So why were we formed? Where did we come from? Well, water is a big deal in Wyoming. I don't need to restate the whiskey analogy, but it's definitely worth fighting for. There's a number of newspaper clippings that I put there on the right-hand side. I think we're all familiar with the drought situation that the state has faced and is currently facing, and how it's changing in intensity. So that really motivated our work from the start, because many in the state saw the oil and gas industry with these large volumes of water that are coming up with the gas and the oil. That's what we refer to as the water cut. We have a very high water cut, and we see this water and it's like, well, let's do something with it. Why can't we do something with it? And so our charge was to figure out how we can do something with that. So there's all kinds of things that go into determining, is it a good idea to do something with it or not? Things like commodity prices involving the resources. Is it worth the investment? And then I'll speak to here in a minute, getting the water from where it's generated to where it can be used. We're a big state and the oil and gas plays are pretty well distributed. So logistics is just as, excuse me, as a big a challenge as the treatment side of things. Generally speaking, treatment for produced water is a challenge. It's a challenge for a variety of reasons, mainly how the quality or the composition of the water changes with time and location, but also what's in it, including the hydrocarbons, minerals, metals, and the salts, which are the money materials that are harder to remove. Next slide, please. So what is produced water? Generally speaking, it's any water that comes up with the oil and gas. Our oil and gas wells are much deeper than our conventional wells that we tap into for our freshwater systems, 10,000 feet or greater in many respects. It can include, if it's an unconventional well, hydraulic fracturing fluids. However, those hydraulic fracturing fluids in the lifetime of the well constitute a pretty small fraction of the overall produced water volume that comes up, even though those have gotten the biggest headlines. The water is very old. Because the water is very old, it has had a lot of time to dissolve the surrounding geology that it was housed in, and we tend to have reasonably high salt concentrations and mineral concentrations and the like. For context, in 2025, approximately 25 to 30 billion barrels of produced water were generated in the state of Wyoming. The largest, most of that is either re-injected or disposed of versus by surface impoundments or evaporation ponds. So a barrel is kind of a weird unit. That's about 1.6 billion, or excuse me, 6 to 7 billion gallons of water in Wyoming in 2025. And for further context, the city of Laramie uses just under 2 billion gallons of water a year. So the green and the red there correspond to our two primary producing regions for produced water, oil, gas. That's the Greater Green River in the red and the Powder River on the right. And that's important because the Powder River tends to have lower salinities than does the Green River, making treatment more of a viable option or economically viable option. Next slide, please. So what are our primary concerns with produced water? First and foremost, from a treatment perspective, are the residual hydrocarbons that persist in the water even after we go through a series of separation steps. From a treatment standpoint, the next big target or the energy hog is going to be removing the salts from the water. So if for context, seawater is about 36,000 milligrams per liter. Many of our produced waters from the Green River Basin are 30 to 50,000 milligrams per liter. Much more fresh in the Powder River, where we can be around 10,000 or less milligrams per liter. So I keep harping on the salts because the salts are where the money is at to make the water usable for some sort of beneficial reuse option. Next slide, please. So there's lots of challenges for the industry. I know the topic here is more data centers, but this also, if we can alleviate water pressures or disposal pressures on the oil and gas industry, then we can open up additional plays for them to pump out oil and gas. Water disposal costs and acquisition costs for the industry tend to represent a sizable portion of the investment that has to take place. And we have a number of formations right now where we have stranded assets around the Casper area. And the reason for that is we can't get rid of the water. So it is an issue beyond just finding beneficial reuse options for it. Next slide, please. So, here's the representative droplet of produced water, and we look at that, and first and foremost, we see the water itself. What can we do with it? There's a lot of things I'll talk about here in a second, but within that water droplet, things of national security concern are really growing in importance. things like our critical minerals, our rare earths, lithium concentrations across the state of Wyoming are high enough that it makes economic sense, about 100 milligrams per liter, to actually mine that brine and take those resources out. Now, from a reuse of the water perspective, why is that important? Well, if you can monetize the things that you're separating out of the water, then you reduce the overall economic footprint of treating the water to some sort of standard to actually reuse it. And so we can actually, in the past, industry was like, no, we're not going to do this because you can't compete on a per barrel basis of just re-injecting it into the subsurface or just letting it evaporate in an impoundment. So that's really important if we look at this more comprehensively. Next slide, please. So this just kind of highlights some of the things that we've seen in the news, many more recent than this, about the importance of rare earths here in the state of Wyoming, and how produced waters and other brines, geothermal brines, and the like really represent an untapped source, and the federal government is now putting considerable funds in order to develop the technologies to make this dream a reality. Next slide. So the other challenge that our group tackles is, well, how can we reduce the cost and increase the efficiency of desalination? This typically serves as the heart of any treatment train for produced water. Won't bore you with data or things like that, but note that we're trying to increase recovery, which means we have to reduce the waste that we dispose of. There's always a waste when you separate salts, which can actually kills more treatment plants than the energy consumption, but also reducing energy consumption so that smaller utilities, smaller industry outfits can actually make this a reality. Next slide. On the critical minerals side, a lot of progress has been made with developing new compounds, things called ligands, covalent organic frameworks, metal organic frameworks, all kind of exciting chemistry type materials to selectively go into these mixed brines and recover the critical minerals. This was probably fantasy about 10 years ago, but there are now actual commercial operations that are going into play where we're using these materials, and we're also using them to recover rare earths from coal feedstocks that you may have heard of with the demonstration facility in Gillette. Next slide. So this, I kept in there, that's a picture of produced water there on your lower left. You'll notice that it has a nice black tint. That black tint is from the residual hydrocarbon, we call them emulsions, that remain in the produced water. And that represents a economic loss for the industry, but it also represents a dagger to the heart for the downstream desalination system. So there's been a lot of work in going into improving those recoveries and making the water more treatable. Next slide. So what are the water reuse opportunities? Probably of most interest here. Well, historically, it has been for irrigation purposes, for livestock watering. Livestock watering can tolerate higher salinities than what we would drink naturally. Enhanced oil recovery is probably where we use a lot of the produced water right now. We also use it for unconventional well development in the form of fracking, and now for industrial uses like data centers. And we'll touch on that here in a minute. Now, some of the hurdles that must be overcome for these reuse options, regulations, they're kind of scant. They don't have a lot of detail. They don't have a lot of teeth because still trying to figure out exactly what we're dealing with. The cost of treatment, it is not inconsequential, depends on the end use. And then for here in Wyoming, we are not a plumbed system, which means that we transport produced water from one site to another via truck. And so transportation or logistic concerns are real, especially if you're trying to go to a centralized receiving and then distribution system for the produced water. Contrast that with a state like Oklahoma, where it is a plumbed system and they move produced water around via pipes and pumps. So much more efficient. Next slide, please. So when we think about data center water consumption, there's two real big elephants in the room. The first water consumer is the cooling system for the data center itself, for the computers. The second source of water consumption can come from the on-site electricity generation or power generation if that is the design of the data center, if they're not tied into the grid. So there's been a lot of advancement in the design of the cooling systems for the computers themselves, the so-called closed loop systems, which are not perfectly closed looped in many cases, but the water consumption there has been mitigated or minimized to a certain extent. The other one is how are we generating our power? And in many of these systems, we're using natural gas fired turbine systems, and depending on the cooling system involved with the natural gas turbine, that can have negligible water consumption, or it can have rather considerable water consumption to go along with it. For that, I've put some statistics that you can read up, but the consumed versus the withdrawn water, they lose a lot of the water there with regards to steam. Now, the water quality required for the natural gas fired turbines tends to be near demineralized, which means that all of those salts and other things that I had mentioned there in our produced waters would have to be removed for that particular reuse option. Technically not impossible, but also not very cheap, and comes with a decent amount of water waste generation. Next slide, please. So we have, I like to say, a lot of opportunity with produced water, but there are challenges that have to be overcome, but there are challenges that can be overcome. The logistics issue that I mentioned before, but also how do we accommodate the fluctuations in the amount of produced water that we generate, but also the quality of the produced water that is generated. Again, very technically feasible. We just have to do it. Sometimes you just kind of got to get out of the chair and start walking. So understanding those logistic issues, understanding the challenges with treatment need to be overcome, and then we can really begin to live the dream of produced water reuse. Next slide. So, Madam Chairman, that I think concludes my presentation. Hopefully I didn't go too long or too technical, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Brandt, for your presentation. I have a quick question about just a little bit of a data point. How much produced water is available right now in Wyoming, if you could guesstimate?
Well, the amount that we've brought to the surface is that 6 billion gallons that I referred to. Now, in 2021, we had 21 billion barrels in that year. And so our value has gone up, and that value will continue to go up as well as age, but also as we continue developing oil and gas fields.
Thank you very much. Any questions, Dr. Brandt? Oh, Vice Chairman Bowman.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Hope you get this one figured out. There's a huge economic impact to the state, and anybody who could frankly crack this egg that's been attempted to be cracked for decades now, it seems like. And so if I understand that correctly, as it relates to data centers, it seems like currently with the current technology, really the only potential use is for a closed loop cooling system, and that's it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And even with that, due to the hydrocarbon content and the other, those items would have to be separated out to just generate a more purified brine.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything more? Great. Anyone else? All right. Well, you got off kind of easy, Dr. Brandt. Thank you for coming and for sharing your expertise with us. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. I think up next we have Mayor Collins. Are you ready? You're next on the agenda. Please come forward. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Chairman, members of the Select Committee, for the record, I'm Mayor Patrick Collins from the City of Cheyenne. I do appreciate being invited to be here today to talk about our experiences with data centers and data center development. I recognize that data center development seems new as the discussions have recently started around the state. In Cheyenne, we've had data center development for almost 20 years now. Greenhouse Data, it's called Lunavi, opened their first data center in 2009. NCAR and Microsoft followed in 2012, and we've had constant or continuous data center construction ever since. Today, we have a number of small data centers and 3 data center campuses with 13 operating data center halls or buildings. We have 3 more data center campuses under construction today and 7 more data center halls being constructed. We also have significant interest in more data center development around our community. In my position as mayor, I meet with data center companies regularly as they are looking at Cheyenne. Learning about their projects I find very interesting, and I take the time to share Cheyenne's expectations during these conversations. I know today your focus is on water, but I want you to know that our expectations of the company will be to do no harm when they come into our community. That means they will use the large power contract service tariff and will pay for every aspect of their electrical services, preventing the utility from passing those costs on to our homeowners and our small businesses. We talk about behind the meter production and our expectation that the sale of electricity will run through the certified utility, ensuring that the city, the county, and the state will benefit from sales tax and franchise fee collections. We discuss our Board of Public Utilities and that their data center development might require a development agreement if the revenue to the BOPU is not enough to cover the future maintenance costs on their project's water and sewer infrastructure. Our residents should not be expected to subsidize any aspect of the data center operation. I share with them our concerns about noise and that we have rules limiting noise. And we also talk about light pollution, especially the temporary lights used during the construction period. We talk about the philanthropic benefits of the industry and my appreciation for what they'll do in the future. But our biggest conversation is about water. I share with the companies our concerns about the use of water in data center operations and our expectation that they will use technology rather than large amounts of water. While Cheyenne does have abundant water reserves, our narrative does not allow for the evaporative cooling or using large amounts of water. If they want to build in Cheyenne using our water resources, they will use efficient technologies like closed-loop systems. I stress the concept of do no harm. That means the data center should not expect any financial help from Cheyenne. We expect them to pay for every aspect and cost to develop their project. So how much water does a Cheyenne data center use? Yesterday, I received a report from the Board of Public Utilities on our usage for data centers in our other industries. As I said, we have 13 active data centers, and I talked about them earlier. They use approximately 200 acre-feet of water annually. That's 1.48% of all the water used in Cheyenne today, and less than 1% of all the water that Cheyenne has available to use annually. To put that in context, a pivot is, I think I heard the state engineer talk about a little earlier, irrigating alfalfa in this part of Wyoming uses about 3.3 acre-feet of water per acre. If a quarter section irrigates 125 acres, that would result in about 412 acre-feet of water being used annually. All of our data centers today use less than half that amount. The original data centers built in Cheyenne used a more water-intensive systems. But since I've become mayor, we have limited data centers to using technology to cool the servers. Yesterday, I met with a company building closed-loop systems at a data center being built here in Cheyenne. And last week, I met with another data center company, also currently under construction, to ask them how their closed-loop systems work and how much water it consumes once they're commissioned. Both companies shared their system uses about the same amount of water, about 2 acre-feet of water. And for context, that's about the same as 8 single-family homes in Cheyenne would use in 1 year. Once the system is charged, it will recycle the same water for many years. They also described it as having 2 loops. One they call the facility loop, and the second is a smaller technology loop that includes glycol. The technology loop cools the server, the chips in the server, and then the facility loops cools the water in that technology loop, and it's in a never-ending cooling circulation. One big advantage of developing in Cheyenne is our cool weather limits the need to use their installed cooling systems. I'm told only about 80% of the time, the outdoors, the cool air like today will cool the system and they don't have to use their technology. After that, the data center only uses water for domestic uses like bathrooms and coffee makers, landscape irrigation, etc. I like to compare data centers with an office building with the same number of employees once they're operational. Our BOPU looked into what the annual water usage would be if all of the hypothetical data center halls were built in Cheyenne that people talk about. Using the technology currently being used on our most recent data centers, they estimate that all the data centers combined would use about 400 acre-feet of water per year. Combined, that's about 3% of our current water usage and about 1.8% of the 22,000 acre-feet we have available annually at the City of Cheyenne. Again, that's about the same amount as one pivot of alfalfa would use in the comparison we used earlier. Cheyenne has a firm yield of 22,000 acre-feet of water available annually, or 7 billion gallons of water that we could use. We currently use about 12,400 feet of water, but when I was elected to the City Council in the year 2000, we used 14,500 acre-feet. It's hard to believe we're using 2,100 acre-feet water less today than we were then. But we lost Frontier Refining. They were making gasoline, and now they make renewable diesel. They went from 2 million gallons a day to 336,000 gallons a day. The Air Force closed a golf course, saving 190 acre-feet a day. And then modern construction techniques, we just use a lot more efficient ways of doing things. And I can tell you guys the truth is this. The Board of Public Utilities is looking to sell more water. The cost of maintaining our water system and our sewer infrastructure is going up. And with our reduction in our usage, they need to sell more water to pay for the ongoing additional maintenance that they have to do every year, or we're going to have to raise rates for our residents. And I would prefer to sell a little bit more water. Some examples of water usage in Cheyenne. A single family home uses about a 1/4 acre-foot of water a year. A coffee shop uses 2 acre-feet. We have 30 of those. A fast food restaurant, about 2 acre-feet. Our grocery stores, on average, about 5 acre-feet. An automatic car wash uses 18 acre-feet of water a year, and we have 14 of them. Walmart distribution uses 25 acre-feet. Laramie County School District Number 1 uses 264 acre-feet. 204 of that's just to irrigate the lawns around their schools. The state of Wyoming uses 30 acre-feet. And the City of Cheyenne, we use 3,360 acre-feet of water for our domestic use, but we use 2,629 to water yards. Madam Chairman, we ask our data center developers to do a lot of offsite improvements. Some agree and they just hire leads to be their project manager and build the roads and water and sewer infrastructure. In the last few years, Leeds has built and managed $84 million worth of public infrastructure projects for data centers, I think since I've been the mayor. Some, like Meta, have development agreements that clearly outline the expectations for both partners. It's a document that goes through our public process, our governing body process, and it's approved by the City Council. I brought a copy of one of those here. It's a 90-page document that I would share with you if you'd like to see it. Sometimes the questions of NDAs come up. I do have an NDA with the board as a board member for Leeds. It's required of me to be able to participate in their board meetings. But I have been asked by a number of power development companies and others to sign an NDA. And I share with them that as a public official, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to sign an NDA. The information I receive in the office of mayor should be and is public. I've heard some concerns regarding annexation of data centers. Every data center in Cheyenne that's been annexed into the city asked to be annexed. They signed a petition required by state law, and they've gone through the public process. They believe that access to city water and sewer is an advantage for their development. Again, every data center that we've annexed has been requested by the landowner. So, Madam Chairman, I think that Cheyenne and Wyoming are benefiting from data center development, looking at our communities at this time. It's allowed us to understand the benefits and the challenges communities with earlier data center development from the late 1990s and early 2000s, some of the challenges and some of the benefits that they found. From what we've learned, we now have the large power contract service. We understand water usage, and we now require technology. We have noise and light regulations. So I think we've learned a lot over these periods of time. And Madam Chairman, I'd be available to answer any questions you or the committee might have about Cheyenne and the way we manage data centers.
Thank you, Mayor Collins. And again, thank you for being here. I'll start with just a general overview of, you've touched on a number of places where there's the role of local government in these decisions and the type of tools they might have. For example, you mentioned development agreements. What other kind of tools would you say for, let's just say there's local governments listening out here that maybe aren't yet entertaining or considering data centers, but would want to know what can we do locally? What is our responsibility as local government in this space? Can you give your view on that for me?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. One of the things I would tell you is, we're not obligated to give them water when they come, right? So I think we can set the rules for what that looks like. We can talk about what our expectations are. As mayor, we have said no to many businesses. We had a slaughterhouse that wanted to come and bring 2,500 jobs to the community, but they wanted to use 1 billion gallons of water a year. That was one, about 20% of our total water available. We were able to say, we said no to that. With the data centers, I think it's okay to sit down with them and talk about what your expectations are, that water is a precious resource in Wyoming and that we expect them to use technology, that they need to be considerate with their neighbors, and the noise and light is a critical part of that. To have proper setbacks and, against other other uses, like if it's going to be up against residential, then that setback needs to be different, and the noise and the light levels need to be different. If it's in a business park against another business, maybe those things would be a little bit more relaxed. And so I think that we're in the driver's seat here. We have the ability to set the rules and to tell them what our expectations are, and expect them to follow those.
Thank you. Can you shed a little bit of light on as you go through that process, what are the points of where the public is aware of discussions where they perhaps agreements are being considered, and how does the public interact with that?
Madam Chairman, that's a good question. So all of our development agreements are public documents. So they're put on our agenda. They're sent to the governing body. They're assigned to a committee where they're debated. Then they come back to the governing body where, again, there's another public process for that. So all of those types of agreements are there. The zoning, when zoning is created, that is probably the most important time for the public to be involved, because that's the time where we decide what could be used there. And once the zoning is finished, then we as a community have decided what is appropriate. And then at that point, we really don't have a lot more public input. So to me, zoning is the most important time to discuss a data center or a business park or whatever that's going to be, to talk about what could go there. Because we have what we call uses by right. And in our business park zone area, a data center is a use by right. So once it's zoned that, then there is not a lot of public comment after that. It becomes more administratively done. Some of our zones have another use permit that goes there that would have to go to the Board of Adjustments to get a final approval, and that is a public process. But our business parks do allow for data centers as a use by right.
Let me follow up just with regard to the public notice itself. So city council meeting, if something's been on agenda there concerning a data center agreement or a discussion, that's notice to the public, the date and time of the meeting and subject matter. And then on the zoning, tell me a little bit about the notice process to the public.
Yes, ma'am. Both in annexation and zoning, we actually send letters to the adjoining property owners. State statute, I think, is 140 feet for certified mail, and then we send them out to 300 feet, letting them know what is going on and what the time and place of the meeting. And then after that, the rest of the community would learn by our public announcements.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any questions for Mayor Collins? Vice Chairman Bonner.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So if I understand what your testimony correctly, all the data centers in Laramie County are currently getting their water from your Board of Public Utilities. Is that correct?
Madam Chairman, through you, today that is correct as I understand it. There is a new tall grass development that's going on that will actually be south of Cheyenne, and it is in the county. They're drilling into the Lance Formation, which if I understand correctly, they're drilling like 2,700 feet to get their water. And but that will be the first data center campus that will be outside the city limits.
Right. I think that's an important distinction. And certainly the ones outside of Laramie County that are proposed, it seems like most of them, if not all of them, are going to do more of that type of development instead of tapping into a current system. And so another question, if that's okay, and somewhat related. There's a lot of talk of annexation. We've seen a few bills that had its origins here in Cheyenne when it comes to annexations. Would you think it's fair to say that the current discussions in Cheyenne regarding annexation have to do primarily with data centers, or are there other considerations at play?
Madam Chairman, Senator Boner, I think there's two things in play. One is our governing body in 2022 made a goal to annex county pockets. And we identify county pockets as unincorporated Laramie County property, 100% surrounded by the city. My governing body decided that that was a jurisdictional challenge, and it was time to fix and bring them in. State law says that if you're 100% surrounded, the governing body can do that. And so we started that process, and we're to the last 7 now. And that has, I wouldn't say it was without controversy, but we went pretty smoothly through that until the last one. There is a small farm that we're an 80-acre farm. That is one of the last annexations. That one has brought a lot of discussion for our governing body. We've postponed that one until later this fall as we're working through a definition of an urban farm so that we can make sure that our zoning gives them the use of by right to be able to continue their farming operations. We don't want to harm that. And so we're going to work through that. And then recently we have about a 1,200 acre annexation for what we call the Cox Ranch. We have the North Range Business Park in the northwest part of town, and this land is just a little bit off of that. I mean, touches, but off of that. And it is designed to be a business park. And we learned there is a data center that would like to be a client in that area. And so there's been a lot of discussion on that annexation. But quite frankly, most of our annexations are not very controversial. But I would tell you, bringing people into the city to clear up jurisdictional issues has been a little bit of a challenge. And this last one has been a little bit of a challenge.
Thank you. Just one follow-up to Vice Chair's question about the public utility so being in that space, one of the things it means is that like you were able to access information about the actual water use of these different data centers because they're on the public system. Is that correct?
Madam Chairman, through you, yes, ma'am. We have looked at the bills that we send each of those agencies, and we've added all of those up to make sure we understand the water use for. We took the car washes and did an average. We took coffee shops and did an average to give you those numbers, and we did the same thing. But we actually took the actual bills and added them up, and today that number is 200 acre feet of water for all of the data centers combined.
Thank you. Anyone else questions? All right. Well, sir, you've gotten off pretty easy by the committee today. And
I appreciate that. And thank you so
well,
much.
thank you again for coming and answering our questions and helping us understand better the facts and even the history was very helpful. So
Madam Chairman, I brought you a copy of one of the development agreements if your committee would be interested in seeing what that looks like.
Sure. If you can provide one to us, I'll take that. Next up is Microsoft. Mr. Jonathan Noble, thank you for coming. Welcome to Select Water. You go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about experience here in Wyoming by Microsoft with data centers.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Jonathan Noble.
Jonathan, I'm sorry, but your mic, might need to start at the beginning with thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Are we good?
You are.
Perfect. Once again, Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Jonathan Noble. I'm a Senior Director of Infrastructure Government Affairs for Microsoft based in the U.S., working with communities across the country like Cheyenne, like the state of Wyoming. Microsoft has been part of the Cheyenne community for more than 14 years, and we are proud to continue growing here, bringing long-term investment, good-paying jobs, and meaningful contributions to the local tax base. Just as important, we are committed to being a good neighbor. That means building infrastructure that supports economic growth while protecting the natural resources that are central to Wyoming's identity, history, and way of life. Earlier this year, we formalized that commitments through our Community First infrastructure principles. Those commitments reflect what we've heard from Wyoming communities, keeping cost of living affordable, protecting the environment, creating local jobs, and investing in workforce development and community organizations. We believe that when we build at scale, we have a responsibility to deliver tangible value and earn trust in the communities where we operate. The demand driving this infrastructure is real and growing. Every day, families, businesses, schools, farms, governmental agencies, and hospitals rely on digital services for information, communication, commerce, education, and healthcare. Just a few examples: your cell phone and every app on it, everything that you have with a screen, including your car, including the screens in tractors and vehicles, et cetera, all rely on data centers for mapping, for information collection, and compute. This is something that is just growing every day. We have 21 internet-connected devices in each home on average in the US. This is an average that is growing every day. So it's not simply an organizational issue, it's also true for us as individuals. I think one of the key pieces also is that large organizations rely on this infrastructure. This is critical infrastructure for how we operate, how we communicate, how we go to action. How do we serve our community? How do we protect our communities? Data centers are the backbone of that modern economy. Much like railroads, highways, and power grid in earlier generations, digital infrastructure is now essential to economic opportunity, national competitiveness and security, and the delivery of basic services. But we also recognize that infrastructure like this must be built the right way. That's why we've made 5 clear commitments to communities like Cheyenne as part of our Community First commitments. First, we will pay our way, ensuring our operations do not increase electricity costs for residents. Second, we will minimize our water use and work to restore, conserve, or return more water than we consume. Third, we will create jobs for local residents. Fourth, we will contribute significantly to the local tax base, supporting schools, hospitals, parks, and other essential services. And fifth, we will strengthen communities by investing in local workforce training and nonprofit partnerships. We've also taken steps to increase transparency, including committing not to use NDAs with local governments. We understand that trust must be earned through openness, accountability, and clear communication. Here in Cheyenne, that commitment is reflected in what we've already delivered. Microsoft has funded more than $68 million in offsite infrastructure improvements, including roads, stormwater systems, trails, pump stations, and water infrastructure investments that serve both our operations and the broader community. We've also partnered with Laramie County Community College to establish a data center academy, helping local students gain the technical skills needed for careers in this industry. And our continued investment is supporting both construction jobs, nearly 2,000 skilled trades since we started construction, and approximately 500 long-term operational roles in IT, security, and facility management. And we continue to invest and grow our presence in this state. All of this underscores an important point. Our data centers are not short-term projects. They are long-term investments in communities. I know water is a central concern here in Wyoming, and it should be. Let me start with a simple point. Our goal is to use as little water as possible and to preserve more than we take. Historically, data centers have used water for cooling, primarily by evaporating water to cool large volumes of air. You can think of an approach like cooling an entire house when you only need to cool a single room. It works, but it's not as efficient as it could be. Over time, we've significantly improved how we design and operate our facilities. In Wyoming, we already take advantage of the cooler climate to use outside air for much of the year. Reducing the need for water-based cooling, our facilities use evaporative cooling less than 10% a year. And our newer designs are far more targeted and efficient. The most important shift is toward direct-to-chip cooling. Instead of cooling an entire building, this technology cools the servers themselves, right at the source of the heat. The system often operates using fluid in a closed loop, meaning the water is reused continually rather than evaporated. Once the system is filled, it does not require ongoing water consumption for cooling. We are transitioning to these newer cooling systems in future facilities in Cheyenne, including the ones we are building right now. When we do use water, it is purchased from the city of Cheyenne. Board of Public Utilities, reused multiple times on site, and returned through the wastewater system in compliance with local regulations. In addition to reducing water use, we've made a broader commitment to water replenishment. This means that for the water we do consume, we invest in projects that restore, conserve, or return water to the same watershed, so it remains available for communities, agriculture, and ecosystems. In practice, that includes efforts like improving water infrastructure to reduce leaks and losses. Some systems lose 10, 20, 50, 60% water to leaks. Supporting watershed restoration and conservation projects, and working with local partners to strengthen long-term water resilience. This includes working with farmers around new irrigation technologies, etc. Across the Mississippi, Missouri, and Colorado River basins, including projects tied to Wyoming, we have supported efforts expected to restore hundreds of millions of gallons of water over time. This happens in partnership with local and state organizations like Trout Unlimited, the Laramie County Conservation District, and the U.S. Forest Service. In closing, we understand that water availability is serious and legitimate concern for Wyoming, and in fact, every community in which we are operating. A fact that's been driven home during this very dry year. Our commitment is straightforward. Use less water, design more efficient systems, invest in solutions that strengthen local water resources, and work in partnership with communities and policymakers to get this right. We believe these goals are not only achievable, they are necessary if we are going to responsibly support the next generation of infrastructure while preserving what makes Wyoming unique. Thank you again for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Noble, and thank you for being here. Committee, do you have any questions for Microsoft? Representative Fortune. Yep.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you for being here. I was just curious if you have maybe historical reference for where you started in data centers and water consumption to where you've arrived at currently, and how much further you think you may be able to take that reduction in consumption.
The technology is always evolving. Microsoft has invested significant resources in that evolution. We have even tried putting data centers underwater at times, but we are always looking at more efficient systems. That starts at the chips, starts with the cooling of the facilities, et cetera. We definitely have started, our systems today are significantly orders of magnitude more efficient when it comes to water than what was true in the past. Even just in the past couple years, this change from evaporative cooling to chip level cooling saves us 50, 60% on water, if not more. As the mayor highlighted, we've gone from using as much water as, a third of a hotel to as much water as one single restaurant with our facilities. So that is a significant difference, and we're continuing to push that envelope and look for ongoing ways to make that more efficient.
Follow up? Okay, Representative Chested.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just a little curious about the technology of the closed loop systems.
Yep.
It seems to me, and I'm not a scientist, I'm a lawyer, so I don't know much about nothing, but I do wonder how the closed loop system dissipates the heat that it collects. So it's collecting heat off the chip. It's got to take it someplace.
Correct.
And it's got to get rid of it somewhere. How does it get rid of that heat? And is that creating downstream problems for wherever that heat goes later?
Great question. So that the fluid is cooled using kind of standard chiller equipment. So you're using what you've seen with hospitals, et cetera, as they look to cool their facilities using standard energy-driven chillers. And that's what we're using to then cool that liquid. But it is a much more targeted cooling. Once again, we're taking advantage of the natural climate a lot of the year. And that too gains efficiencies, not only on how we're operating from an energy perspective, but also as it relates to how we're treating that cooling.
Yes, please.
Quick follow-up. Thank you, Madam Chairman. So does the chiller system require more energy? Is a closed loop system requiring more energy to cool the system? And does that, if there's an additional energy cost, does that create downstream water use?
The closed loop systems do require more energy use. We work with our utility partners not only to ensure that we are making sure that anything that we need from the grid isn't passing on costs to other ratepayers, but we're also constantly exploring with them the best way to power our facilities. Microsoft has some rigorous commitments around carbon-free energy, recognizing that the entire grid needs to work holistically. We often are looking at wind, solar, and other uses to power much of our grid, working with great partners like Black Hills, who honestly is a national leader on this effort.
Follow up? Okay, thank you. I'll just go a little further on that train of thought about the closed loop system. I've had folks ask me about how is that system maintained? Is there a period in which they flush that out, they refill? Tell me a little bit about that part of it.
Sure. So closed loop system is not that much different than the radiate heating systems that some of you might have in homes or some of your friends might have in homes. These systems are charged once with a fluid. That fluid is treated appropriately, and then it remains in the system. There's no evaporation. It's very efficient system. Occasionally, you might need a little bit of topping off, but it's a negligible amount. Right now, the estimate is that you might need to recharge that system every 5 years or so, although some folks think that is a very conservative estimate. The process of recharging is done in partnership with our utilities. We clearly work with our utilities extensively on how we use the water, and any water we put it back into the system. We are subject to the same regulations as any other user, whether you're a home, whether you're a business, et cetera. We are not looking for special treatment on this piece. If the system is able to handle the solution that we have, then we work with them on discharging it into the system as appropriate. If that is not something that the system can handle, then we work with providers to remove that water, take it to a company, take it to a facility that can manage that water, and then we go through the process of recharging that water. But it's anticipated no sooner than every 5 years.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Well, seeing none, again, I thank you for being here and being willing to tell us a little bit about what Microsoft is doing and provide us some information. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
Great. All right, next up, I see her coming. Mary Throne, good to see you. Welcome back to Select Water.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I'm on. So good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see all of you. Chairman Lawley, and hello to Vice Chairman Boner, even though he left. Members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. I never served on this committee back in the day, nor appeared in front of it, because as some of you probably know, my husband, Kevin, retired from the Water Development Commission a few years ago and was and is the only water expert in the family. But it is nice to be back in the building for a visit. I am here today on behalf of the company I now work for, Prometheus Hyperscale, a Wyoming company with 2 proposed data center locations in Wyoming. Our flagship site near Evanston, on our founder, Trenton Thornock's family ranch. He's available for questions, and I believe you'll hear from him shortly. And on Falls Ranch, on the Converse-Natrona County border, which is in Senator Boner's district. We are excited by the opportunities both projects present for Wyoming. Prometheus is an energy-first company in an energy-first state. In both of our Wyoming locations, we are self-generating with natural gas, using a large energy project to create jobs and generate revenue in Wyoming, instead of shipping energy out of state to create economic opportunity outside of our borders. For longer than I have been alive, and that is a while, it has been our goal as a state to add value to our minerals, to diversify our economy, and end our boom and bust cycles for economic growth within our borders. While we have energy abundance in Wyoming, we all know we have scarce water resources. Prometheus is here today to share our commitment to stewardship of our water resources and to explain our liquid cooling technology that, in contrast to prior data center designs relying on air cooling and massive amounts of water, limits water uses. And I just want to point out, it is sort of counterintuitive that air-water cooling uses the massive amounts of water and liquid cooling does not. So just, if that's like confusing you, it confuses me, but that's what we're here to try and explain. To explain our cooling technology and anticipated water use, unless he tells me that he wants me to go on. Sorry, I apologize for this. I would like to introduce Trenton Thornock, our founder and our senior advisor, to tell you more about our company and our liquid cooling system. And following his comments, we'll both be available for questions.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Thornock. Please proceed.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Chair, ceding the floor to us so that we can explain ourselves a little bit. Hopefully you can hear me all right.
Yes,
I'm
we can
coming
hear
to you live from one of our investors' conferences. So to explain a little bit about what Prometheus is, as Mary has already noticed and mentioned to the committee, we are a very power-forward, liquid-cooled data center developer, and the current use or demand that we're seeing for our assets is from the AI space, from a major AI lab. And the design that we are using is similar to the one that our industry colleague from Microsoft described, in that we are using a combination of dry coolers and chiller plant on a closed loop. What that means is after the facility is commissioned, it will be filled one time with a mixture that folks in the oil and gas space are going to be very familiar with. It's called propylene glycol and water, or PG25 for short. And the system is charged once with this propylene glycol water mixture. That mixture can circulate for up to 6 years without being changed out. And then at the end of 6 years, it can be taken away by one of the suppliers, such as Coastal Chemical, back to one of their facilities where they would polish it and replenish it. So the bottom line is that we do not use water for cooling in our system.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Mr. Thornock. And do you have any other further comments, Ms. Throne, or do you want to proceed to questions?
I would just, again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Apologize that Mr. Thornock's not here in person. We want to reemphasize and reiterate, we are a Wyoming company. Our projects are on private land in Wyoming that's beneficial, has the potential to be very beneficial to legacy ranching families in Wyoming. But we are good stewards of the land because we come from that ranching heritage, as do I. And we think these data centers, particularly if we can locate them in other parts of the state, as is the desire of the governor and others, we can create opportunity across the state that will benefit generations. This is long-term economic development for the state, using our in-state energy resources and instead of shipping the commodity out of the state, as we have done since statehood.
Thank you very much. Any questions for either Ms. Throne or Mr. Thornock? Representative Chestic.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a similar question, same question actually for Mr. Thornock that I asked Mr. Noble, and that I'm still not sure how the heat gets out of the building. You know, you can take it off of the chip and take it away in your closed loop, but the closed loop's got to be cooled somehow. And where does that heat go? How does that happen? And is that energy intensive? And are there other concerns about getting rid of the heat once the closed loop has to cool itself down?
Chair, do I have your permission to
Yes.
answer that question?
Please, Mr. Thornock, go forward.
Thank you. So obviously the heat does go somewhere and it leaves in a pipe. It goes outside the building where it runs through the dry cooler that I mentioned earlier. On the hottest days of the summer, it will be assisted by a mechanical chiller plant, which is a screw compressor chiller. It creates cold by consuming electricity. And so the heat moves outside of the data hall and through either a dry cooler or a chiller plant to be dissipated outside of the data center hall.
Thank you. Follow up? Follow up? Okay, thank you. I have a question. So where will your water come for the closed loop system? I think we might have heard something earlier in the day that may be a well, but I just wanted to confirm, especially your comments, Ms. Throne, about be able to locate these kind of facilities in more remote areas. So could you kind of speak to that for us?
Madam Chairman, I'll give a shot answering that question because I think it's easier to do it in the room. So the wells on site will just be used for domestic office building purposes. Mr. Thornock can jump in if I get any of this wrong. The water that's used for the chillers will be trucked in by the company providing the PG supply. And then they'll truck it away after we're done.
Thank you for that. One follow-up with that. Is that water coming from somewhere else in Wyoming or out of state? Or do you have any, I'm trying to get that, that's what I'm zeroing in on is Wyoming particularly, but.
I think it depends on the supplier. But I would add that we are talking about, and Trenton has used this analogy, it's not perfect, but for one data hall, we're talking about the equivalent of 3 Olympic swimming pools of water, which again is much less than, infinitely less than the numbers that the state engineer mentioned. It's about 6 acre feet according to my math, but again, I am not the water expert in my family.
All right, thank you so much. Do you want to add anything, Mr. Thornock, on that?
Yes, only that it's a one-time in 6-year fill. So there's no continuous usage. It's a one-time fill. And then that fluid circulates for a number of years until it needs to be polished or changed out.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question. So thank you for anticipating that about was it in what period of time would it be recharged? So, Representative, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble with you over there, Representative Chestic. I keep wanting to call you Representative Ken, which is your first name.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I think this is a question for either Mary or for Trenton. how new is this technology, and what is its track record in other locations? How long has it been in use, and has it been successful? What problems have showed up elsewhere? Any history would be helpful.
And I will defer that one to Mr. Thornock, Madam Chairman.
Yeah, so this is not a new technology. It's been around probably for several decades. Hasn't been used on the scale that we're currently talking about because the base technology has shifted a lot in the last couple of years, as well as the intended use of the compute. So when data centers were mainly servicing cloud services, they didn't need this type of dense cooling. They were also required to run at much lower temperatures. Because we are using liquid as a heat transfer medium, liquid has 3,200 times the heat capacitance of air of the same mass. So you need a much lower medium to move the same amount of heat. The reason why it's coming into vogue or becoming popular to use this type of cooling is simply because of AI and the type of chips that are required to run training workloads for AI and inference workloads for AI. So when you ask Grok or ChatGPT a question, it goes into a compute system and spits out the answer for you. Those chips run at about 80 degrees Celsius. So they are very hot, and we are able to use liquid to move that heat around, and in this case, outside of the building. And that's really what's driving the change. It's not, I would have to say on the part of a lot of data center developers, it's not that they're trying to save water, it's that the technology has changed, which requires them to use a different kind of cooling system. And it just so happens that this one doesn't consume water on a continuous basis.
Senator Guru, I hope I haven't overlooked your hand for long. Please proceed.
No, Madam Chairman, no problem at all. My question, and I just want to make sure that I got this straight. So, Mr. Thornock, this water and glycol mixture that's trucked in, used this facility, used for 6 years, then it's trucked off by the same folks who brought it and sent back to their facility at another location where it gets regenerated to come back and use maybe at yours, but somewhere else. Or back to the plant in Wyoming. But at no time in Wyoming does that fluid, that liquid, ever get discharged anywhere. It gets taken to a facility where it's, you said, polished. Do I have that straight?
That's correct. You can think of it very similarly to a business that I used to be in, which was spent catalyst regeneration for refineries, for example. And then the question that usually follows is that, what if this stuff gets spilled, right? Because that we can't guarantee that that will never happen. Propylene glycol is not the same type of propylene that's in antifreeze. This is the type of propylene that is a food additive. It's in cosmetics. If you get exposed to it, it's benign. Unless you consume a whole bunch of it, I probably wouldn't drink it myself because there's no reason for that, but it's not a dangerous substance.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gru. Any further questions from the committee? Oh, Senator Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Thornock, can you tell us, you said that this new facility uses less water. Does it consume more energy to use the less water, or is it similar, or how does that work?
No, it's not going to consume more energy. It's just a different kind of heat dissipation. And instead of using evaporation, you're basically using what is equivalent to the radiator that's in your car.
Follow up? Okay. Any other questions, committee? Well, Mr. Thornock, we appreciate you coming and sharing with us information to our committee as we look at this issue of data center water use. And so thank you for being here and talking to us about your project. We really appreciate it.
And thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, committee. And nice to see members of the Water Development Commission too.
Yes, we're delighted for them to be here too.
Thank you.
So committee, next is going to be public comment. So I want to get a feel for the room. And you can be seen, tell me how many are online, Eve, but in the room, how many would like to speak to the issue of data centers and water use? We have, I know there's some other general concerns concerning data centers. I really respect and understand that. We have other committees this interim that are going to be talking about other aspects of data centers. But who would like to speak to the issues that we've heard about today concerning water use and data centers? Because we'd love for you to speak. We're glad you're here, but I just want to get a feel if we need to do some time limits. So let's see, I see one over here. I'm not, let's see, and one here, one there, four. We have four in the room. 5. Who else? 6. Did another one? Keep your hand up until, because people, some of them might think I don't want to miss anybody, but I'm going to kind of do an estimate of time. I think I have about 6 people maybe in the room. Okay, on online, Eve, do we have anyone? One online. All righty. Well, so what I'd like you to do is that want to speak, come on up. You can fill the chairs that are up here. That'll make it go a little bit faster. And again, I just ask that you keep your comments to the water usage. I know there's broader issues and I do understand that. And I will say I really appreciate that you guys came and I want you to have an opportunity to make public comment, but let's keep it on this topic because that's what's before this committee right now. So of water use, but come on up. Who else? You can come and just sit in these 3 chairs up here if you want. And then one, then the other. That'll make it kind of move a little bit faster process. And okay. And then when you're done and a person's done, if you'll go back to your original seat and someone else can come up. All right. Well, good to see you, legislator. How are you? Representative Brown.
Okay.
Will you state again, and for this is for everyone, for the record, if you'll just state your name and for example, we of course know who Representative Brown is, but for our record, it would be good for him to state that and for you as you come up to do that for us. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Gary Brown, Representative, House District 41 here in Cheyenne. I've done some research over the last few weeks on data centers and on the usage of water. And of course, those that are wanting to build the data centers and the data center companies are going to paint the rosiest picture they can paint. We all know that. But the information that I have been finding isn't quite as rosy as we would think. As I continue to look at things, we find that they will claim that the system is filled once and basically circulated forever. Well, that may be true in a laboratory, but we don't live in a laboratory. We live in Wyoming. We live in a state where water is a big issue. And so as I've looked at this, and I've looked at other states, I've looked at Ohio, I've looked at Virginia, in Georgia, Florida, Texas, and many of these other states that have data centers. Ohio in particular had a data center that was, they have to regenerate these on a more regular basis than we've been told. And this, much of this water was coming out with chemicals in it and had literally been put back into the water system in Ohio, and they had to truck water in because the water was polluted. And they were using up to 120 million gallons a year in this one data center. Then we look at what's going on here in Wyoming. Out on what we've known as the Terry Bison Ranch for many years, which is no longer Terry Bison Ranch, They're putting in a data center called the Jade. The Jade, when it is finished, will be the largest data center in the United States. From all the information I've got from four different websites, that data center between the closed loop system that has to be regenerated and the power generation could use as much as 20 to 30 million gallons of water a day. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to say, oh, that's just not true. I've looked at several different websites on this. And so we need to consider this. We need to slow down. I got it from a confidential source yesterday that I was talking to, and he asked me, please, I have to keep him confidential. We think that there's a few data centers coming into our area. Besides the 20-some under construction or in operation today here in Laramie County, there's going to be an excess of 100 data centers. This is something that we just can't do. I would like to talk about some other things with data centers. I've been asked not to, so we'll save that for another committee. But we have many concerns about data centers coming in here.
Any questions for Representative Brown? Thank you very much for coming. Appreciate you being here. And then again, someone can come and fill his chair if you want to speak publicly. Could you go ahead, please?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Anna Kaufman. I'm the Government Relations Manager with the Wyoming Outdoor Council. This is an issue that I'm not sure we would have jumped into if our members hadn't brought it to us, but it really does fit into our mission, looking at quality of life and quality of environment for Wyoming. Data centers are proliferating really quickly. It sounds like here in Cheyenne, they've had them here for a while, but across the country, the AI boom is causing them to just explode. And in some cases, that's happening a lot faster than smaller towns are really ready for, whether that's their zoning or their regulations, or just having the resources to really understand what the impacts might be for their towns that maybe aren't quite as practiced in handling them. I think we need a thorough understanding of what those impacts are going to be. The closed loop systems are more water efficient, but they do take more energy, and where that energy is coming from is important. If they're not tapped into the grid and they're building new power plants for behind the meter generation, that's going to completely change what their footprint looks like in terms of water usage.
And could you please focus on water use in
Yes.
particular?
Yes.
Those are important issues. I don't deny that.
Yeah.
It's just that we are focused on water use.
Yes.
Here. Thank you.
That's why I bring up the generation behind the meter, because that can change their water usage.
I do understand.
Yeah.
But
So we just want to make sure that we're able to kind of look at that effect on a per project basis. We appreciate that the projects that are coming in now are operating on good faith, but not all of our municipalities might have the resources to evaluate those impacts. And as a state, we should make sure that we have regulatory frameworks in place that will protect them as well.
thank you very
Thank you.
much. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
members, Kay McAdams.
Hi, Kay.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me here. Going to try to stick with the water.
Thank you.
Water withdrawal numbers alone do not tell the full story of a data center's impact on Wyoming's water resources. The critical issue is consumptive use. How much water is permanently removed from the local hydraulic system through evaporation, cooling processes, or export out of the basin? A facility may advertise water recycling or closed loop systems, yet still continue substantial amounts of water that never return to the aquifer in usable form. I have to ask, are we looking at a commodity or a resource here? Because all I hear lately is just economic development. So is our water a resource or a commodity? So we need to think about that. There's also growing discussion about using water-treated produced water from energy development as a future industrial water source. However, if hyperscale data centers are built before that technology is commercially proven, operational at scale and economically reliable in Wyoming, then freshwater aquifers may still bear the immediate demand. Future technological possibilities should not replace clear accounting of the actual water sources and consumptive use that will exist on day one of the operation. And in an arid state like Wyoming, where communities, agriculture, and future generations depend on limited groundwater supplies, transparency about true consumptive use, not just withdrawals, is essential for informed public decision-making. Water withdrawal numbers alone do not tell the full story. Oh, wait. Unless someone like you, who cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. I don't think the companies are always transparent. They don't, like when I looked at Prometheus today, it's a new company. They use new ideas, but they're not proven. And so I think that's a little scary in the fact that we have to become the guinea pig of these companies. I mean, would we want, like they've advertised Oklo, Excel, their batteries, which I'm not sure those companies, they're not even producing a product yet. So we're running the risk here in Wyoming of not understanding what's being brought in. So I need you to just think about that and slow it down, slow it down. I'm the Lorex. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees, for the trees have no tongues. Why can't we look at our water as a resource and not a commodity? I'm just begging you to really think about that because these technologies are unproven. And then the aquifer that they're using, the lands, oh, they've already been granted the water rights. And if it goes wrong, what happens? So I'm just asking to look, please. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Madam Chair.
Good to see you, Mr. McKay. Please proceed.
Great to see you too. Rennie McKay, I'm president of the Wyoming Business Alliance. And for those of you who don't know us, we represent businesses from all over the state of all sizes and all industries. And so data centers are obviously a great new industry that we see. And just give you a tiny little bit of background. I was helping Governor Mead and was his communications director in 2012. And when he saw that opportunity for data centers to drive economic diversification in Wyoming back then. And so here we are now, I think in a moment where after kind of generations of efforts, we're starting to see some of the economic benefits. And I think that, you know, as we hear those concerns about impacts, I think it's a great conversation to have because we need to have it. And as the Business Alliance representing all industries, I think this is so true, is that from our ranchers to our small business owners to the other industries, there is a need to make sure that a resource like water is managed appropriately. But I would say that we have an incredible track record in Wyoming of figuring out the Wyoming way of having economic development and also taking care of important resources. So I just wanted to thank you for taking this topic up and having a conversation. I think it is very important because we are starting to see the benefits of this in terms of a new industry that is going to help our tax base expand. And we're also going to see the jobs that are so important to families like mine. But I think also those resources and the management of those resources is so important. So hope you take this seriously as you go forward to figure out the way that Wyoming does this to make sure that this is done so that all industries can benefit from this, because it should have that opportunity to build our oil and gas industry. It should help our power generation go forward as well. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Could you quantify a little bit the number of your members that use water in their industries, in their businesses? I'm not talking about domestic water for bathrooms, that kind of thing, but could you quantify that? as you're speaking I'm just trying to get a feel for uh, the industrial water use, basically space among your membership. I'm assuming it's a lot.
Madam Chair, absolutely. Yeah. From oil and gas to mining to obviously ranching and irrigating is not an industrial use, but certainly then you've got that in manufacturing. We've got that in many of those spaces for our members, that they are water users that are regulated and are expected to make sure that they the resource is protected for other users and for their families in that domestic use as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. McKay? Thank you for being here, and just appreciate you being here and for you providing comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We have anyone else in the room before we go to someone online? Representative, identify yourself for the record and please give us your comments about water use for data centers. The one that had like a little mouth, yeah, there you go. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
It's a little confusing. Ours, like red, when we're green, when we're on, these guys.
I
are
know
red.
I'm confused, so.
Very confusing for us legislators.
I just want to say one thing, that this is a property rights issue. And the people that own the property have the right to do anything they want with their property. The problem that could be caused is that groundwater is not limited to the physical boundaries above ground. And I'm glad that you're looking into this, and I'm sure we're going to have more. We're not going to figure this out in a few days. And I'm glad that everybody's looking into this. And like I say, it's a property rights issue, and that's what we need to look at more than anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Representative Johnson? Seeing none? Thank you for being here. Thanks for your comments. All right, is that all in the room that we have covered? Public comment in the room. One final call. All right, we have online. We have let me find the sheet there. Well, welcome. Introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your comments, comments concerning water use with data centers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Steve Del Bianco. I'm President and CEO of NetChoice, trade association for the tech industry, whose members include Google, Meta, Amazon, OpenAI, Digital, Applied Digital, and X. And I wanted to bring a little bit of a national perspective to what has been a fascinating hearing. I have learned a lot today.
Yeah, could we turn you up? Okay. Could you turn your volume up a little bit? Maybe that will help. I'm not really sure, but I think folks in the audience, and it's just not quite clear. So.
Is that any better, Madam Chair?
That is, and just speaking a little louder too, I think helps. Thank you.
That's right. I'm going to bellow it out and make it very fast. So I represent more of a national perspective, and there's just a couple of points I wanted to bring to your discussion there in Wyoming. The first is this general idea about why does our industry need to build so many data centers? I've had that question at hearings like this all over the country. And I usually turn it around and say, well, why do you need so many data centers? Because you understand our industry builds them because you, the businesses, the individuals, the government, educational institutions, continue to ask for more stuff to be in the cloud. And you all know the cloud is in a data center. It is not in the clouds. In fact, over the last 10 years, we have averaged building about one data center every single week. And that is before AI came on the scene. So in that experience, we can build them anywhere in this country to serve those of you in Wyoming or anywhere else. So we choose to build them where communities welcome them with open arms, where communities have power and communities have water, if water cooling is on the list. We look for communities that welcome the jobs and the property tax revenue. But note that I don't say that we need to have access to water. You've heard today from experts, from Mayor Collins, that we don't need to consume water for cooling. So some citizens have genuine and emotional concerns about depletion of groundwater or pollution of groundwater. But I encourage those citizens to take the time and listen to Mayor Collins. Listen to the actual record on data centers that use dry cooling, because Wyoming is a place that could benefit from more data centers. You are an asset in the fact that your climate and geography is excellent for low water cooling. Your cool, dry climate means we only need to use evaporative cooling on the hottest of days. And if your water supply doesn't accommodate that, talk to Mayor Collins. We won't use any water at all, but instead use electricity. So all I want to make sure you understand is that companies around the country, all of my industry, is committed to go to communities that have the electricity, and in those communities will accommodate whatever their water capacity is. We will cover the costs to build and upgrade water infrastructure. Take a look at our community development agreements, which bind us to that. Take a look at our track record at honoring those promises and making sure over 20 years that Mayor Collins can look you in the eye and say that data centers have met our promises. We don't use significant amounts of water in Cheyenne. And that is an example that everyone else can rely on. It's not untested technology, it's proven development. And I welcome your questions.
Thank you so much for being here, Mr. I'm gonna get your name right. I'm gonna really try
Yes,
hard.
it's
Del
Steve.
Bianco.
Perfect. It's perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you. And I'm gonna see if anyone has any questions. Do you any questions, committee? Well, thank you so much for your testimony and waiting in line until we got through the testimony in the room. So thank you for being here. All right, committee. I think that's all of the public testimony. We're going to close public testimony. Committee directives. I think based on the testimony right now, I don't know of any committee directive we would have right now. If someone has something they want to suggest, committee, please do so. Seeing none, then we will basically close the meeting, having completed our agenda. We will basically conclude this meeting of Select Water. Thank you guys for being here. All of you. Thank you.